I'm going to call the Gresham-Barlow Board
I can hear you.
work session to order. Roll call. We have myself, Chris Powell as chair. Blake Peterson is absent. David Liggett is joining us online. Dr. Member Gomez is absent. Sean Farnes is here. And the big position and attendance is superintendent. Cook is here. Okay, and Superintendent Cook is here as well. And what we're going to do as we approve the meeting agenda, we're not removing anything, but we would like to move up under information items #1. So it's under C1. C1 and move this up ahead of where it's just going to be our first thing. So it's going to be up above the action. So motion to approve the agenda with moving C1 ahead of section B.
I move to approve the meeting agenda with the moving C1 ahead of B.
Then moved by Sean, seconded by Holly to approve the meeting agenda, moving item C1 ahead of section B. And David will, all right, I see David's head nodding. So, all right, hand raised. So all those in favor? All right, thank you. We have an agenda. Since we moved that item up, that means that the first thing that we're going to hear from is the District Equity Committee District Advisory Summary and Recommendations. And that is going to be presented to us with Dr. Dawn Nagoya Jackson. And we have some students that are here with us as well. We kind of changed a little bit how we were going to do this, but Dawn is good on her feet. And she will make sure that we have an interactive opportunity here. So Dawn, I will go ahead and present. I will hand it off to you unless there's someone else. If Mr. No, who's gonna do it? I think it's all you.
Yeah, it's all me.
All right.
Well, it's just me for the beginning, then it's not me at all. It's all these other amazing folks. Sarah, how do you want to do the slideshow? Can I just?
So I have a clicker, but the caveat was it was not working great last time we did. So if it doesn't move forward, just, click the button.
Okay. Going through and just making sure to let you all know the areas that we're going to be focusing on this time. We're really focusing, there's a lot around safety, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, belonging and achievement. We really are not focusing a lot on instruction during the presentation tonight. We're going to start with introductions. There's a whole bunch of folks that you all are not familiar with, I think. And so we thought we could all go around and just do name the group you're a part of and what is something you hope for Gresham-Barlow quickly, if not a thesis, just a quick little tidbit of something that you hope for this district. I'll start. My name is Dawn Nagoya Jackson. I am a part of the district. Work at the district office, and I hope to have more student leadership as we move forward.
I'm Josie. I'll use any pronouns. Something, I'm from Springwater, high school. And something that I hope for is bringing students together. My name is Haya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a part of DEC and a sophomore at Gresham-Barlow High School. And something I hope for GBSD is to have a safe community overall.
My name is Michael Bresu. I use they pronouns, and I am a senior at Gresham-Barlow High School. And something that I hope for our district is I just want everyone to have like a good time over.
My name is Orasto, and I go by PM, and I'm part of the DEC. I'm also in the budget committee, and I'm also a parent of a kid that goes to Highland. So what I'm hoping for GBSD would be just a more equitable allocation of resources.
I'm Jasmine Kling. I am a parent, and then I also work for a nonprofit in Gresham that supports youth, Northwest Family Services. And then something that I hope for GBSD is that it continues to keep the focus on supporting youth.
I am Araceli Arredondo. I'm a liaison for the Gresham-Barlow School District and also a parent of a student at Gresham-Barlow High School. And I hope to see more inclusion within the district. I'm Jennifer Lopez Zafra, a she, her pronouns. I'm part of, well, I was part of the
Equity Advisory Committee, and I work at Highland Elementary, teach third grade. And something I hope to see for Gresham-Barlow is where all students see themselves represented, seen and heard.
Hi, my name is Wai Santiago. I'm the Connections Coordinator for the district. So I work with our students in alternative education. I use she, her, and pronouns. And something I hope for GBST is seeing some of these recommendations like actually come into place.
Holly Riegelman, Board Vice Chair, also a parent of 3 Barlow High School students and a West Orient Middle School student, community member. And something I would like to see for Gresham-Barlow is that students are engaged and wanting to get homes.
Chris Howitt, Chair, she, her. I attended schools in here, as did my children. Been on the board for a number of years, and I'm still in the learning phase with a lot of this. And so I'm just excited about the directions that we can move and in a positive way and make sure that we're including all the voices at the table.
Dr. Sean Farnes, I'm a school board member. For all those you who don't know, we have elections coming up, and so it's important for you to know like what areas you represent. Holly is basically a district-wide position, so she represents all the staff or all the students or her constituents. You're more kind of downtown.
No, I'm North Gresham and downtown, so I'm North Gresham attendance area in Clear Creek.
Yep, and then I'm the Orient, Barlow, Damascus area. And I love hearing from students and families, and I want to make sure that all of our students are receiving the best education possible so that we're prepared for life after school.
David, did you want to introduce yourself online?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is David Ligatich. I'm a board director, also a local business owner within our community. My son goes to Sam Barlow. He is a senior this year, and he's very excited to be graduating here pretty soon. Something I'd like to see, I get to visit the schools a lot, and I see you guys through the halls, through your classes, and you guys seem like you're having fun. And I just want to make sure everybody's still having fun and they have that desire to go to school because of that.
I'm Sarah Avery. I'm the board secretary, so I help set up these meetings. And I also am a parent. I have 2 daughters that are currently in school and then one that is too young for school. Something that I hope for GBSD is that every student is able to find their passion, that they can do something that they're passionate about and that they love and enjoy.
And I can't forget Sam and Brad of a student who goes to West Orient.
Hey, my name is Joe Truss. I'm a consultant working with the district on inclusion and lots of other things. Hope I have is for young people to look back on their time in schools with some fond memories. And also kind of leaving school feeling better about themselves and knowing who they are.
I'm John Cook, interim superintendent and parent of a graduate of Barlow High School. And I'll go back to the inclusivity and belonging, whoever said that before, because I think that's where we need to continue to put our focus.
Tracy Klinger, deputy superintendent, married to a Gresham Gopher graduate and parent of 2 Barlow graduates. And a lot of things that people have shared were things that I was trying to like stay unique, but really I think where I'm landing is really thinking about students finding their passion, but also feeling that strong sense of belonging and connection and support. Students feeling that they have somebody that's their person, that's a peer or a staff member.
Buenas tardes, my name is Araceli Farias, my pronouns are she, her, and ella, and one thing that I'm hoping for Gresham-Barlow is that families and students feel welcome and valued in our district.
I forgot my pronouns, she, her, ella, and one of you didn't get a chance.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Lung. I'm a student at Gresham. I'm a junior. He, him pronouns. I guess something that I hope for GBSD is that or the reason I'm here is that I think there's a lot of great good in Gresham. It's often an area that's kind of overlooked and looked down upon. But I think there's a lot of brilliant minds here and a lot of great ideas here. There's a lot of good that comes from the Gresham community, and it's really overlooked because of a lot of other things. So I'm really here to stand up for Gresham and advocate for Gresham. for the GS year.
Thank you. I know, are you all gonna introduce yourselves?
Sure. I am Angela Green, she, her pronouns. I'm the assistant superintendent in the district. I echo everything that everyone else said about hope for the district, but I will add that since I'm over human resources, I also advocate for all of our adults and staff who take care of children to have joy coming to work and to feel like they could be at work in a place that they belong and they could see.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carla Gay. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Executive Director of Innovation and Partnerships for the district. And something that I hope is that students come to school feeling like they can be their full selves, their full identity every day, and that they're accepted for who they are.
I'm graduates. My hopes echo very much the things that everyone has said about students feeling a sense of belonging, finding who they are and finding their passion for what they want to do, you know, beyond our business.
Thank you. Right. I think coming together as community and trying to create community is a big part of the district equity committee and the district advisory committee. We spend a lot of time in our district focused on instruction and what happens once students come into our classrooms. But one of the things that we don't have a lot of data on or a lot of focus on is how belonging or exclusion happens outside of the classroom. And so the district advisory committee was formed this year, very first year we've had it, really trying to facilitate inclusion of all identities, especially those who are most marginalized in our system. And showing proportionate representation and experiences in our spaces, practices, processes, and policies. And really supporting the sustenance of culture, identity, and humanity of all of us, right? We all come into our schools and we know that we're doing better creating that for some groups than others. We know that through our outcome data, we know that through our testing data, we know that through the inclusion audit that we did 3 years ago. And so this group is really trying to listen to spaces across our schools to see how we're doing now. Joe, you want to kind of talk about the actions that we've taken as a group?
Yeah, so, you know, even though a lot of times data tells us where we should be focusing on working, it doesn't necessarily always sustain folks to continue doing the work. Whereas bright spots in places where things are working give people a lot more fuel. So we kind of didn't want to go around doing another audit or another checklist of looking at, you know, deficiencies or what's not present. So we really want to start with where do we see some great practices around inclusion happening, to share those ideas at large with folks who might say, I don't know where to start and where are there examples of this. So that was really the focus of this. So we started with a few schools and we'll finish the year visiting about 6 schools. We're spending, you know, about 3 hours at each school, probably about an hour moving around in teams of about 10 people. And the idea is hoping that this informs future work, but doesn't necessarily tell us so much where the problem is, but tells us where there's some good practices happening so that they could either be, you know, studied, learned from, but also pointed at as like where to get started for that group of folks who kind of says, okay, where do I start? And is anything actually happening that's good, right? So we don't want to just kind of start with nothing's great. And we found out that there are lots and lots of bright spots.
And then one other focus of the district advisory is trying to create a protocol that supports equity teams getting formed in all the schools. That has been a practice in a lot of our schools and is a part of our contract, creating that in our schools. So trying to have that happen in a consistent way, even though it might look different at Highland than it does at Powell Valley. Having consistent practices will really allow us to have that team be as productive as possible. And so, just like Joe said, really trying to start with bright, shiny spots in our district where beautiful inclusion is happening in order to use that data to inspire and to replicate. And so we looked at a number of areas of focus. You all want to read those off for us?
Yeah. I can start, main office / entrance,
Hallways, lunch area,
cafeteria / library. Bathrooms,
the auditorium, counseling offices,
assistant principal,
discipline spaces,
academic support rooms, special education,
gym / PE,
prayers / nursing.
and health and wellness, and bathrooms and workspace.
So the district advisory committee came up with a list, families and staff and students kind of came up with a list. And then we took it to I said that wrong. The staff on the district advisory committee came up with a list and then took it to students and families. And they were like, oh, you forgot about this area, right? And so collectively, we built this list of where we were gonna go and look to see what was happening in these spaces. We've been to 5 schools so far. And we built them around focal groups.
Yeah, and our focal groups have been students of color, Muslim students, low socioeconomic status, multilinguals, students with children, housing insecure, Muslim and Orthodox students, neurodivergent, differently abled, newcomer / migrant students, non-binary folks, and LGBTIQ2+ students, which based on equity audit attend school the least, and students with IEPs / 504s.
Can you do a definition for me? I've never seen the word folks before. What is folks?
Non-binary.
People. Oh, so it's like the word folk, FOLK, yeah, it's spelled differently. Okay.
And this group of focal students came up from a lot of different places. We looked at our data, we looked at outcome data. We know in graduation outcomes in 4 years, right? In terms of who's on track for 9th grade, but also in terms of empathy interviews, the inclusion audit, and talking with our families and our students. These areas, these students were identified as groups that we could do better at creating inclusion and belonging for. Anything to add? We talked about, all right.
So as we were visiting places, we had some things that we were considering, or kind of questions we were kind of sitting with. So we first wanted to identify a focal group of students, and then this idea of like, how are those students experiencing school? But like Dawn said, what's different about this is not the classroom, which we often spend so much time talking about what's being taught, how's it being taught, how are we assessing students, but students and people spend so much time in all these other places. So we were intentionally thinking about any other place we could think of. So first question we tried to sit in these schools with was how and where can our focal students who were on the last slide see themselves represented? Mostly visually, I would say.
And the second question was, how do focal students have access?
And then how and where do focal students feel welcomed?
How can focal students interact with space, edit, innovate, give feedback, preserve, or change space?
How do focal students move freely?
How do focal students experience joy, appear comfortable? Are they included?
How and where are focal students celebrated?
Do focal students know the routines? What is expected?
And how can focal students get help when needed? Do focal students feel comfortable asking for it?
So The schools that we have been to so far are, we went to Hall today. We went to Gordon Russell, to Springwater Trail, to Ray, to Dexter McCarty. And we're headed to Highland next. And these were schools that were identified from the folks in our groups as being bright spots that have practices that are worth replicating across our district. And we went, and these were some of the bright spots that we saw in those spaces.
We have our bilingual office for office staff.
Student work displayed, section of identity.
Student awards and recognition, so SEI thumbs. So there's books on display and highlighted.
Student requested music, jokes, mindfulness, and
Diverse student club offerings, so UPSC club, Mencha, Islamic cultural works. Points to your language handout in the office.
menstrual products.
Black/women history month, facts, people, arts, indigenous land posters.
Indigenous murals, Twitter polls, scavenger hunt.
Microwaves for heating food. Mental health services, flyers, and halls and bathrooms. Yeah, great.
Designated counseling space.
Non-English, untranslated posters. Their expectations, student language / creative.
And inclusion of students with disabilities.
Maybe we have some of that sense. Nursing areas available. Plans in the schools.
BIPOC staff.
And LGBTQ to SIA plus art mosaics.
All right, these were all lists, but these were collected by the District Advisory Council, and then we sat with students who go to school in our system and said, how do these bright spots live for you and your schools? Is there anything you all wanted to share?
Yeah, so I know like for Barlow, like, we have a wonderful art program, and throughout the halls, I always see paintings, drawings, even some pottery and some shells. And so student artwork is displayed everywhere, and it just gives everybody an opportunity to see all the work that their fellow students have done.
At my school, there's a lot of clubs that are all created by students, and it really just involves our community. Everyone's not here right now. Like BSU at Barlow, it recently started, but it's still moving in the right direction, just like including students in activities.
I mean, I'm just gonna jump in and speak a little bit about the Gresham perspective. The culture one is a really big aspect, specifically to Gresham culture. There's a lot of cultural clubs for every different type of group. There's Slavic club, APIC club, BSU, all these different groups of people that are like doing their own things, and there's a really big encouragement for them to come together and create like awesome things. I know APIC club does a collaboration with Metcha and BSU every year. It's called the Cultural Feast, and we invite students from all across the school to come, bond together over food, like make new friends, do activities together. Michael even came to that one. So that was really awesome, people from Barlow. And so there's a very big emphasis on culture as a whole. Each cultural club also gets their own designated assembly in which they get to speak about the things that their club has done, a little bit about their culture, maybe do like a cultural dance or display or some sort of that thing. So culture is a very, very big aspect, and it's something that like Gresham students take pride in, is representing their cultures, sharing it with the world.
And I know we've been through the acronym soup thing, so do all those acronyms make sense to folks? BSU, Metcha, API, okay, I just don't want to assume.
Well, to be honest, Metcha, I'm not.
Somebody want to speak about Metcha? The Mexican, I was gonna look it up because I didn't.
Just been around for a while, I don't know.
I don't know the acronym because
It's a leadership group.
it is leadership.
And
From the Latina community.
from the Latino community, and it's really about building leaders within the community. So there's a lot of instruction, guest speakers come in, kids working together for projects around the building.
And it is in Spanish, it is Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanx de Aztlán. So it's a movement, it's a Chicano movement. of Aztlán, so.
It's a great group of kids. They do really awesome things around the community. It can be even good to like the elementary schools and like interact with the students there. It's really great. So great group of kids.
All right. So, these are just some of the images. Us talking and giving you a list is different than you getting to see some of the amazing things that we got to see. So I'll just start with this one. Ray centers students at every single step, and they have these Ray student norms that are posted throughout their school that were created by students in first person language about what their commitment is to being a Ray student and making Ray a place that is safe and full of belonging. You want to talk about this one?
I'll pop in and we'll just rotate. So we just saw this one today at Hall. There's a lot of student work all around the district, but this one was special because it's student work, it's student art. In this case, it's an African-American artist, but also students doing this interpretation of that. And, you know, a step further for students talking about themselves and their identity. So, you know, not just, you know, looking at someone else's art, but making some personal connections as well.
This is a tribal nation map that we saw at Ray, and it was very neat to see different tribes, where they're located. And I mean, I really enjoyed learning a lot from this.
There we go.
I don't remember what school this was at, but I had a list of Dexter. I had a list of different diverse books that were displayed for students to see with different authors as well.
This one was Dexter. Students can put in song requests. And then on Fridays, they play different student song requests. Students talked about what a bright spot this was for them at the school as well.
This is at Dexter, and this is all of their amazing staff. I mean, all of the kids had great things to say about all of the staff. So it's nice to know that they feel supported and that all of these kids have their person in the building.
And it was really wonderful. I worked in schools where only the certified folks are listed. The custodian doesn't have a picture up. You know, in at Dexter, they had every single one of their staff represented in their Hornet Hype squad.
Sorry, I was looking at the, this is also at Hall, and they just had some posters around. They had their mascot all throughout the school. Just really cool to see.
And they have a den there that is a space where students can take space if they need it. Some students are on planned space breaks. It's not stigmatized. It's not just when kids get in trouble. It's a reset space. It's a powerful space.
You mind going back one?
Yeah.
I think we talked about today. We also noticed that we couldn't find where the discipline you're in trouble space was at all, which we thought was really powerful, because normally you can find that and sometimes it's really obvious. But there were places where students could get support, whether they were requesting support or someone was asking to talk to them, but it didn't feel like a stigmatized place, or a very embarrassing kind of place. Things felt just much more included, I guess I'd say.
This was another Black artist, Alma Thomas. Every pod studied a Black artist, and then every student on that pod created artwork in that vein. So Kahindi Wild, they had Basquiat in one, they had Louis Armstrong in the kindergarten wing, and Alma Thomas. I think this was second and third.
So this one was also all that they had students' names on them. And it was based on how much they grew on the iReady reading exam. And it would just have their name, and some grew like by 10, by 40 points. It was just highlighting how their growth, which was really cool to see.
This was at Hall, and if any student needed a break, these were the expectations that they were to follow. And the values of Hall Elementary on the other side. And it was really neat to see that they were in Spanish, not just in English.
The ways in which our librarians hold space for all of our students to be seen and celebrated and to celebrate each other, right? There's that concept of windows and doors, right? Windows into other people's lives, doors into the world, and then mirrors into your own life. And our librarians hold a big piece of that work across the district. We saw that in almost every single school we were in. Okay, so those were some of the bright spots, and then we also had wonders, like questions.
Yeah, so. Like, hard to find office or counseling areas,
Lack of bilingual signs and encouraging messages.
more art, murals and posters. Seating for students and admissions,
Space together with crowds and noise.
gender neutral bathrooms that don't need permission. Private areas with changing,
Prayer space,
more BIPOC staff. Discipline cubbies,
paying schools and bags about teachers outside rooms and full-time equal.
translated expectations around the building / the halls. More privacy for intense confidential conversations and just like a reset space.
Is there sound privacy and confidential space?
There's some wonders that you all were gonna talk about, students.
Yeah, so, at least for me, when I was growing up in this district, I've been in here since I was in kindergarten. That space in elementary school, that didn't exist for me, and I went to only 2 years in West Florida, and so. That was something that made me comfortable, like quiet spaces. And also I feel like some of the elementary and middle schools have some resources that I feel like it's still useful in high school.
So with me, I've been in this school district since I was in kindergarten, and one part of like me going to school was middle school. I went to Clear Creek, and there was a lot of conflict a lot of the time, and I felt like it wasn't necessarily resolved by the solutions that were used, which was often like the discipline cubbies, which was just sending kids down to the office, and they would sit these cubicles for like the rest of the period, and then they'd be sent back, which it just doesn't tell them what they're doing, and it kind of shuts them out.
I can just jump in really quick. I think the gender neutral bathrooms that don't need permission. I don't personally use it, but I did know that at Gresham, it's like almost always locked because it's an issue. You have problems with kids vaping, and so that takes priority over this like ability for students who may need to use that space. And they have to ask like custodians, but also it's just like right out, and like the other bathrooms are like kind of tucked away. But the gender neutral bathroom is just like right in the open, like the commons. And you just like, people know if you're going there, so I feel like that can be an issue. If students want to use it or other students see them going into that bathroom, it can be made fun of, things like that. And if you have to ask like a custodian or like a hall monitor or something like that, I feel like a lot of the times they've said like, no, that they can't at the time. I don't know, they haven't given a reason. But I think I experimented with it once because for a site council thing, I just wanted to see if that was like a thing, and they straight up was like, I can't do that right now. So that is a one we're definitely.
And what I would have said is that she was one of her orders was prayer spaces because, you know, she wrote on here that the only place would be the bathroom, which I don't think people would want to pray in the bathroom. So yeah.
Thank you for holding those. Kaya had to leave early. I appreciate that she came, even if it was just for a little bit. So what happened was the district advisory committee went out and collected all of this data and then presented it to the district equity committee 2 weeks ago. 2 or 3 weeks ago, and all of us sat together and looked at that data. Oh, sorry. I changed it on my personal computer.
So these were the areas where they were asking us for recommendations, right? The policy recommendations. So we walked around, we set up big pieces of paper around the room, and we went and wrote what we thought could be changed in those spaces.
And we kind of came up with some categories. So the second one was around space, just, you know, what does this data tell us about how we might rethink using space in the building, or just how to either repurpose or just rethink about the infrastructure.
And the trainings, and the YouTube clips and the books that were being used.
And the fourth area was around how to welcome back staff and students to either re-communicate or rebrand or like re-energize everyone to what it is we're doing.
And the materials and the resources and the people that work in our buildings.
And I guess I didn't say this, but those of us who are here tonight make up about half of both of these groups. So there were a lot of other people present as well.
So now we are at a time of reflection. So I would just like to ask what questions you have about the data. I know we have presented a lot of material, you know, throwing it at you, but I just wanted to see if we have any questions about it.
I don't have any questions about it, and I'm pleased at the things that you were looking at and the questions that you were having, and I know that there are still gaps in the information. And so I'm encouraged that we'll continue to ask those questions to get more information. And when I looked at some of them, I thought of that once, but did I do anything about it? Maybe not. And so for me, it was a little bit of an internal, what am I doing to support if I know about it? And if I don't know about it, why don't I know about it? So kind of that double.
My question is, so obviously at Gresham, the gender neutral bathrooms, you have to get
Yes.
a key permission, whatever. Is that the same at Barlow or?
Not to my knowledge, but I also don't use them, so. Yeah.
But to your knowledge, you haven't heard
Yeah.
fellow students.
I am not Barlow, and to be honest, I don't even know that we have a gender neutral bathroom. We have a single stall and it just says restroom, but we don't have a designated gender neutral restroom.
I think, I mean, the single user ones are gender neutral, but that's a good question about, we saw a lot that things aren't clearly marked, and so that might be a good thing to think about, but in a lot of our schools, we did find that there isn't. Like at Dexter, it's, you know, and I'm not pointing out specific schools that were built before a certain time too, it's harder, we understand that infrastructure. But it's definitely a need to try and find space.
Please put a sign up on those installed doors.
So I have another question. I wrote it down, so that's how I knew I'd remember to ask it. How are we engaging with our third-party service providers, the cafeteria and the bus? Because you talked about some of the cafeteria. How are we engaging then with, we have someone else who is in charge of the cafeteria and we have someone else who's in charge of our bus services. So how are they becoming engaged in these conversations and processes?
We didn't really tackle the bus.
Okay.
Personally, I don't think I made it on our list, and yeah, so we didn't spend any time observing or talking to folks who work with the buses, cafeterias. Sometimes we found ourselves talking with cafeteria workers, And they were, they were there working. And some, like today, we spent a whole bunch of time talking to the hall cafeteria workers and they shared about their experience of being staff members there and in that case, how included they felt. As a part of the staff, and how much pride they kind of had for working there. And some recommendations they had for things that should be happening district-wide that sounds like isn't always happening district-wide around like signage and posting around like circuit size or something like that. But they have some things to say, when asked, when they feel comfortable to share.
And we can go into this more. I'm gonna move us on to the recommendations. However, our bus crew just came and had a whole conversation with our principals and we talked about aligning some things. So there are conversations happening. And some gaps that were like, oh, this would be a really good conversation to have in the future. Because bus, believe me, was a huge one that came up for kids as a place where good stuff happens or chaotic other stuff happens. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it definitely came up. All right, we're gonna let you all do a little bit more reflecting, but we're gonna move into out of all of this data, and like Araceli said, we literally went around, all of us, plus about double us, right? Went around and made recommendations in a lot of different areas, and these are some of those uncategorical recommendations.
So I'll start it off. The first one would be to create common graphic signs for all of our spaces. And this kind of came from looking around Gresham High School. We have a lot of newcomer students from everywhere. So different languages, but there's no signage in any other language than English. So how will a student from Ukraine or South America know where the cafeteria is or where the counseling is? So creating those universal signs, hospitals have color-coded floors and symbols. So how can we make that easier for our families? Also, not just to tell our staff, hey, you're not doing this right, or this is what you need to do, but offer more training for staff around how we can better meet the needs of our students that we are failing. And also to create equity teams and student advisories, and then have both the DC and the DAC work together to help them develop those protocols and norms and kind of guide them on how to establish those student advisories and give them a little more agency in their school practice and decisions.
And the other ones that offer more trainings for staff, and I feel like we'll. I was like, are we going to?
So there was a lot of strong feelings about cabbies, let me say negative, strong feelings about it. So it'd be nice to kind of review the practice and protocols related to that. And then, we would like to also just have acknowledgement of the LGBTQ SIA plus presence and also provide them support in buildings. And then we would also like to take a look at lunchrooms for space for students with disability to join in meals. Again, we realize that there are constraints with certain buildings, that maybe were built, back in the day, they may not have that. They may not have the capacity to accommodate people, but where we can, it'd be nice to take a look at that.
Other ones was to humanize admin and teachers. And then we kind of saw that at Dexter with their high SWAT. Teachers aren't there to just tell students what to do, but let's get to know them as a person outside of school, what they like, what they're like at home, their families, what they don't like. Also to examine and expand multilingual roles as cultural brokers. So they have a lot of knowledge, firsthand knowledge from our families and students. So taking in their input and making sure that we're getting that information and using it for our attendance, disciplinary meetings, all of that. And then the access to bathrooms and changing spaces for all students. We don't know at Barlow what their process is, so making sure that those are clear.
And then next one is training for staff about how to create more movement throughout the day. So specifically, we know our students love recess. And they really need those times to move. So like training staff across the district to give youth more time to move and because it's so important. Positive phone calls. So giving calls home when a student does a really like does good things and making that a practice in the school. I know I've heard North does that and it's going really well. Representation and reflection of our students in our schools, arts, murals, boards, and books. I know at the beginning of one of our meetings, we heard a recording of students, and one of the things that has really stuck with me is one of the students said that they don't see books that reflect them, and so that's kind of continued to be something important for the group. And then the last one, more site visits to focus on bright spots and study how the site made progress.
And I realized when we were going around the room, I didn't ask if David had either some thoughts or questions, so
David, sorry.
What's that?
I said, oh yeah, David,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
No,
So-
you guys are totally fine. I really appreciate the amount of effort and time you put in this. I do not have any questions.
I loved that, Josie, I'm just gonna do a shout out to you. I loved that Josie brought up, humanizing teachers and administrators. Lots of people did, but the way you said it was just really beautiful. Like when you know somebody else's, when teachers know student stories, but also when students know principal stories. It's not as easy to be like them. They, right? It's like, oh, that's my principal. They care about me. They have this going on. One of the teachers, one of the students that I talked to at Gresham High School, I overheard them in the hall saying, you need to not give him a hard time. His kid is really sick in relationship to a teacher. And I was like, holding that space for humanity just is really important on all sides. All right, that was a lot.
So for reflections, we would like to know what bright spots did you hear that center our students? How could this data be reflected and supported by policy? And how could you use this data in conjunction with what you heard in the SIP presentation to talk to our community about the work that we do as a district?
Yeah, good questions. I don't know that I have an answer to all of those right now, without processing and thinking about it. I love the bright spots. I've seen many of those, myself. I have noticed the teachers, now I don't know what it's called, the hype squad, thank you. I've stopped and looked at each one of those because I like that they're being just real and funny and playful. And I just feel like that's more relatable for middle school students who love to be funny and playful. As well as a lot of those other things I've noticed. So I appreciate you guys pointing those out and the work you guys have done. The other two questions will take more thought. And discussion by the board, I think, how we can reflect those in policy. They're great questions. So appreciate the work you guys have done. Thanks for the time that you guys put into it.
One thing that wasn't on this list of bright spots that I might bring to your attention was over at Gordon Russell. We were just there Monday. And this part is humanizing staff members is in the library, there's a map of the world and the staff put pins in where they are from. And so like there's some stuff from staff from South Korea, England, of course, all across the United States. But I thought that was really, really cool to see. Of course, board's about policy and not practice. But for me, as a dad, I would like, if my child needed to go to the bathroom, I'd like them to have access to go to the bathroom. So it would be nice if in practice, students didn't have that barrier, that literal barrier of inability to go to the bathroom.
So I especially like when there's the bright spots, that it's visual, that it's pictures, that it's drawings, that it's things. And that it's not, as I look at it, I think I've interpreted it properly. That anyone can be in that bright spot, that it's not based on honor roll, that it's not based on something that may be difficult for you to achieve this month, maybe next month, but that all students have that opportunity to be in that bright spot. And I think that is something that I like going into the schools and being able to see that. Same as what Holly said about policy and we're looking at that all the time, because I look back at policy that we had 15 or 20 years ago. And sometimes it's a little cringy, and we look at it with a fresh view, and it's constantly recognizing that sometimes we have to go back and talk to the legislators about what did you really mean by this policy? Because it's not working for us. So we do a lot of that interaction at different levels. And then I think it's very helpful when the board has this information, especially when we talk to our community. I think the biggest thing that I come away from it is when we talk about inclusion and talk about making sure that all students are represented, we're not taking away from anybody. Nobody else has to give up something in order to have all of our students seen and heard and recognized. And that's the message that we give to our community, is I'm not taking something away. We're just making sure everybody has that same opportunity and that same ability to be successful. Because I want you to stay in this community and be successful. And if you're not, then bring me with you. And I want to see what else it is you're doing that's successful. So that I think for us is the big part of getting the presentation and hearing about what's going on and what's not going well. So that we can again be a part of that conversation with policy or guidelines or awareness and move from there.
David, do you have anything to add?
I'm a man of few words tonight. I did get to sit with the teacher from Hall on Monday, and you guys brought up the positive calls home, and I was listening to her talk about that and how the first thing that parents thought when the school was calling them is their child was in trouble, and how they said, no, this is very positive. Here's something excellent your student did today. My eyes lit up. I love that. As for number two, that is something I'd have to talk to my board members about. And then number three, I speak a lot about to our community about what we do, and this information helps greatly when I am in those talking points. So I appreciate again your time on this.
Okay, that was a lot of data. We're gonna end with an exclamation point. So the exclamation, oh yeah, go
Can I say
ahead.
one, I want to say that the
Please,
last
Joe.
word. I just want to say, in this work, and this is especially for the board members, and I think for the central office folks too. Sometimes we think that we're choosing inclusion, culture, climate, social emotional learning work over achievement, academics kind of work. Like there's this narrative around that, right? And the truth is, because sometimes maybe you all as a district are hearing this idea that the state says you should be doing some inclusion related work. And that's like the wrong narrative around the work. The truth is that like the research in brain science says that it is very difficult for students to be focusing on achievement and achieving and learning and using their executive functioning and the upper parts of their brain if their lower parts of their brain, like literally like in their physical brain, is being activated and threatened and attacked. And so literally if you feel excluded, whether that is truth or believe, it's really hard to be in this learning kind of stance. So like just like a message for you all as board members, like to both to hold and also communicate out is focus on inclusion work is around setting the conditions so that the learning can happen. So much that, we have decades of trying learning, and the data doesn't show that it shifts. Oftentimes because there's a large group of students nationally that don't feel comfortable, don't feel included, don't feel like people really want them there. So it's hard to be in the space. It's hard to receive the things that teachers are trying to give them. So just it's really around like marrying these two ideas around like all the social emotional stuff with all the academic stuff. But you can't do the academic stuff if you don't have the feeling, emotional, psychological parts present. So when we're going around looking for these elements of inclusion, we're trying to see where those conditions are kind of present. So even as we're saying, it's like the message hopefully isn't, we should be doing this and not focusing on teaching and learning. They really have to come together, but it's hard to do the teaching and learning if the inclusion and feeling and social, emotional, and psychological part's not there. So just want to name that, like, as you think about like, oh, well, maybe the inclusion work is done. Then you'll kind of get back the same kind of data that we've gotten for decades upon decades upon decades.
Thank you, John. That's really important. He's, as long as sitting next to me, he's like, that's true. Okay, so a couple of next steps and then the exclamation part. I forgot this part. Just what comes next, right? It's always holding ourselves accountable. We did a lot of work here. So all of this data is going to be presented to ILT and cabinet, and then we have an inclusion plan. We had an inclusion plan for 3 years, which I presented on for 3 years. We're starting a new cycle. Year 4, 5, and 6 of the inclusion plan. And we will get a lot of feedback from our district equity committee, which is made up of families and students and some staff, and then our district advisory, which is made up of staff. And then we'll present that to you whenever it is done. So our district equity committee is, again, made up of students and staff and families. Our students on that committee have taken on leadership in really unique and beautiful ways. The state tasked this incredible group with, being advisory to you all, the board and the superintendent. We understand that there's some gaps in terms of being an advisory to the board. So that is one of the next steps too. We'd like to talk about how that can happen more. But also identifying patterns of joy and connectedness and patterns of bias. And so our students, we're missing Deanna. She's all the way to the left. She's in Costa Rica studying right now on an exchange, and Haya left. But our students have taken on leadership in really beautiful ways. And I thought it would be great to end with an exclamation point of you all talking about some of that work. Michael.
So I went to the Koala conference. Yeah, conference. And I'm just like speak about like my experience in DEC, also about planning the student-based health center. And just being able to like meet everybody and like be part of such like a large thing, like it just felt like my voice was being heard, which often student voices are ignored. So that was just really great to see.
You did an amazing job. So an area of patterns of bias came up in lots of our schools, but East Gresham reached out. There was a lot of bias comments around a whole bunch of different areas, racist comments, homophobic comments, kids being getting made fun of because of their body size or their ability. And so instead of having adults, become the peanuts, we decided to do something different. And I sat with Lung and 2 students from Dexter McCarty. What did we do?
So yeah, we went to East Gresham. Kind of the situation over there it was definitely an area with a lot of hate, a lot of bad things, a lot of bias. Area not conducive to learning, right? It's not all what's happening. So we went to East Gresham with me and the 2 Dexter students who are not here. And basically went to all the 5th grade classrooms and kind of surveyed them, did this community outreach piece. And we asked them, what's going on here? What's going on at East Gresham that's preventing you from learning? What's going on here that's like, what's going on here that's kind of like preventing you from learning, what's going on here, it's creating hate, all of these different things that's causing barriers to learning. We asked all the fifth graders, like, what's going on, and they basically said that there was a lot of issues overall, but the biggest one that was happening was at recess time. There was a lot of issues at recess time, especially with the violence, things with fights, hateful language, a lot of really bad things happening at recess. So we took a component from sort of like my organization, which is a mentorship organization, and we kind of asked them like, how should you solve this? And we gave them sort of examples of other schools that have done, kind of solve their own problems. And they really wanted to do a thing where they wanted to kind of go into those kindergarten classrooms, and go out to recess and kind of like, see what's going on and try to like mediate themselves instead of having adults do it. Because they felt that adults a lot of the times would just, whoever reported it, both kids would be quote unquote in trouble. So they would just never like report anything. And it was ultimately like what they would call like a race to who could get to the teacher first, is what they described it as. So we went over peer mediation, which is an activity that we went over. My organization went over with Multnomah County. And the training, we had a training with them talking about social emotional learning, and empathy and restorative justice and a lot of these practices, working with kids. We gave this whole presentation to their sort of leadership classroom and like extended, and these leaders who were like selected by their counselors and their teachers kind of came together. We talked about peer mediation and we gave them sort of like mediator badges. So they would go out to lower classmen recesses, so like kindergarten, K through third. So they're fifth graders going to K through third recesses and kind of staying on the playground. And with those badges, they had like authority, but they weren't like tyrants with it. They were basically, they didn't have the power to like directly stop anything, but they would basically break things up, see if a resolve could happen among the students. And if not, if something serious happened, they would go straight to the teacher, report what was going on. And that lowered a lot of the violence by a significant amount. And this is us basically presenting to them kind of what peer mediation is, the rules of it, this idea that you are not like judging them. You're not coming to a conclusion or a resolution. You want something that's fair. You don't want to bias to one person.
I just talked to Dr. Miles last week and she said their incident reports, their referrals have just plummeted during recess because of this program. So I think we're going to Hollydale next. Hollydale's like, we want to do that. So it's just a really great exclamation point of you all being leaders as part of the DEC. So thank you. And you're next, Josie. Come on.
That's kind of us.
All right, that's it. We just wanted to come and present. It's a lot of work that these incredible folks are doing. It's not led by the district leadership, right? It's all of this collective expertise. Thank you all for coming tonight.
All right, thank you. I think Sarah will. Let's take about a 10-minute recess so that we can say goodbye and do stuff, but we'll turn off the microphone for a few minutes and take about a 10-minute break because we have a lot more meeting to go.
This is only
the yeah.
This is the right spot.
Yeah, this was the best part.
So unconvened. All of these students need pictures and evidence for all the leadership they do for scholarships and such. Can I get a picture of them with the board presenting to you all, please?
Yeah, where do you want us to be?
I don't know, like maybe over there.
You got David at that screen.
Oh, yeah.
Over here with David.
Perfect. We have learned sometimes pictures don't.
Oh, so we just have to cut it. You've got.
Yeah,
that's got like stuff on it. Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, if we come up this way so that we're not in front of.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, cause see, it's.
The screen, yeah.
I don't know, are they doing it with us?
Is everybody?
We don't want me to just by our.
Yeah, go on. Okay, I'll take the students first.
And then we can join the students.
Little space. Am I over far enough? All right.
You're too tall, Michael, okay.
I know, I can't see anybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work.
My dog, so for my kids, all that.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
When you come back and then do that. officially.
Yeah. Come back.
We still have.
Sarah, we're gonna go ahead and, let Carla speak about Gresham Arthur.
So can you reconvene us back into meeting?
Do that?
That'd be good before we make adjustments to the agenda.
Laying it out before we went back, so, okay, so we are back in session. Our students who gave us a wonderful presentation about the District Equity Committee and District Advisory Summary and Recommendation. It's a fantastic presentation. Look forward to having more conversation as the work continues. We do still have plenty to go on our agenda, and our next item, because of the time and what we've been working on, we're going to move up item D2, the Gresham Arthur Academy request. That will be our next item, and this is just an information discussion item. This is not an action item at this time. Carla Gay is presenting this.
I really have a presentation. Gresham Arthur Academy submitted a request to the board to increase their pass-through dollar amount from 80% to 90%. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I believe you all received the email. There's a lot of moving parts, but happy to answer any specific questions.
I'll just throw one out there that you may or may not have an answer to at this moment, but do we know what kind of a monetary increase that would be?
Yeah, and our financial, I'd have to pull up the dollar amount, you all, I can look at it right now, but.
Between 500,000 and $1 million.
Yeah, it's, so one of the challenges is that if you do. If we made that arrangement for Gresham Arthur, we would have to have some way to either do consistently for all of our charters. Or make some other rationale for how there is a difference. We have asked our finance person, Dennis, to do some analysis of how much the district puts forth in our staffing and supports. And he's been working on getting all of that together. Right now, it's about 500,000 if we did both of our, and it's 80% for K-8. And then 90% for high school, 95% for high school, and that's state school fund.
I think it is important to note that today there was the public hearing for House Bill 344, which would increase it mandatorily up to 95% for K-12. So I'm kind of in favor of waiting and see, if possible, because it could be, we make a move at 90 and then 3 weeks later we have to go 95, right? I think in order for it to make sense to me, I would need to know the financial impact. And then what are we getting for it? As in, are we no longer having to support their sped? How are we basically leveling out the cost? So we are getting this money for services provided. Are they taking on those services? Yeah. So it's no longer costing us.
And what you're already getting is perfect as well, then it's to show what, I know that's hard to break apart because those are hours of work that are divided.
Parts of other
Not
jobs,
just the
yeah.
charter, right? It's,
Yeah.
hours
It's
pieced
parts
together.
of lots of people's jobs, to figure that out, so it's definitely an approximation and it definitely has an impact on our budget.
I do think it's important too, and I don't remember if it was in the letter, it may have been, that the why for Arthur Academy is really about the cost of their facility and how
Yes.
that is in some ways pricing them out, and some of the other Arthur Academies in the metro area have less expensive opportunities that they haven't been able to find in Gresham. So that's a layer of the challenge for them and a part of their request.
And I would want to know, comparatively, is that the going rate? Are there so we basically required, at the last minute for one of our other charter schools to move and find a place in Gresham.
Yes,
It was a little bit of a turmoil for a little bit, but they were able to find it at a cost that they could afford. Are we giving up and affecting our budget so they're stay where they're comfortable, or is there a place in space that's better?
In this case, they've been searching for a long time. They've been trying to find a cheaper place. This is, like Tracy said, it's coming from a good spot. They are, and they're
I think
in a
we
tough
Put
place.
them in touch with our
Realtor.
realtor.
We even, as you guys talked about at the business meeting, the portables, they even considered trying to buy them, get those, and then put them on a different piece of land, and that didn't work out either. So they're trying.
Has their enrollment changed much over the years? Are they pretty steady?
They've been pretty steady. Right now, I think they're right about 160. I can look real quick.
And is that based on their space that they have? Do they have a wait list?
I don't know
I mean, if
about
they had a bigger
that.
space, would they have more interest?
I believe they do a lottery and have a wait list.
I think
It's
that
more
might
than
be
they have.
Yeah.
But that might come up in their presentation.
They're required to have a lottery unless they have more spots, or they have less demand than they have spots. Most, often charters do want to grow. And then the conversation usually comes around during, the charter renewal as to what is that overall impact on the whole system in allowing for that to take place.
So the cap is a district imposed cap or a self-imposed cap?
It's in their charter school agreement with the district. And all of them are like that. They have a cap based on, and when you negotiate it, almost every charter agreement has a cap on enrollment.
And 80% is the minimum for capacity.
Correct. 80% state school fund is, and David has it here, but David.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so, sorry to interrupt. I just, we're going into uncertain times with our own budgeting and financials. I think Arthur Academy gives a lot back, but is this the right time? Is this the right place? $500,000 divided by 160 students, it's $3,125 a student. Numbers don't lie. It's hard to give money when you don't have it. And I'm not trying to be negative or anything like that. You got to look at it from that perspective also.
And to be clear, I'm not against a 90%. I just want to see does it work? Because I mean, yes, it is a hard financial time, but if it pencils out where they take on some things themselves and the financial responsibility of that, so spend whatever it is, that's a good conversation to have. But if it's we keep doing everything and just give them more money, that's in this time, like David said, that's a harder.
Sustain.
Well, and the other part, if we did it for them, why would we not do it
Correct.
for the other groups? And that's,
Like Tracy or Carla said, we'd have to come up with a pretty good rationale for not.
yeah,
I don't know
and
what that is.
unfortunately, the rationale, just because your lease is charging you more money, it's not really the rationale.
And that's where the rationale, well, we're taking on these services instead of, you, Gresham-Barlow taking it on, we're taking it. That would be a
They would, and I don't want to belabor it, but I would just to add to a little more information. Right now, for all of our charters, and for our alternative ed, any student in outside placement, unless they're with another public district, we manage their special ed services because of the legal liability aspects of it that have been advised and that could certainly be revisited, but typically, historically, the advice has been because of how litigious IDEA is, and that is often where some of our lawsuits as a district come from, then we have a responsibility, then it has been more fiscally sound for the district to provide those services than because we're responsible either way for the kids there. So then if there's a legal aspect to it, that is where it has, sometimes it makes sense for the charter school to provide those services or another public school district, but there's more information to look into were we to pass on some of the things that we deliver to them, there could be unintended consequences. Also, just to clarify on the numbers, it's 180 students is the cap for Gresham-Barlow Academy. I don't know exactly how many are enrolled right now.
At Gresham-Barlow at the end of January is 161. And And that was down a little bit.
And it's 180 ADMW. So what that means is that that's not necessarily always 180 students. That might mean that it's 180 for waiting, so.
Yeah. So hard numbers in January, I could look up their hard numbers.
So when they come at our April meeting with their annual report will be what they're doing now, the work that they're doing now. This conversation shouldn't be a part of that presentation.
I mean, they should just report the plan is that they should just report to you on the evaluation, their data from last year, from 23-24, and then any updates during 24-25. They could ask you or bring this up, they certainly could mention this, and remind you that they sent the letter that. And then it's up to the board to decide how you want to respond to that.
Well, and oftentimes when we hear from charters, we do hear their fiscal picture as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't be any request for action that night.
Right.
That's not what that content is for.
I think even, Lewis and Clark mentioned they would like to have more bathroom.
Lupine.
You know, or sorry, Lupine.
Yeah.
Asked for that, which is fine. I don't mean to ask for it, that's great, but we need to make a decision. Totally, well, all Gresham Arthur Academy, but not to do with the 90%. Why is the cap on ADMW versus students? That seems to be a harder thing to kind of tackle. You know,
It's actually, I
others.
misspoke, it is students.
Okay,
It is students, it is students.
okay. I was gonna say, that's really hard to like.
Details around why they. One of our set of contracts for our private alternatives is based on slots, which is ADMW. So if you have a double weighted student, they take up 2 slots. The charters are based, the language was students, so the students.
Can you go back to what you said before? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. If we have if Arthur Academy has a sped student from another area district. That is, I don't mean to name another district, but outside of Gresham-Barlow. We're taking on the responsibilities for that student, including the financial responsibilities, or are those other districts?
The interesting thing about charters is that online charters are slightly different than brick and mortar charters. So for brick and mortar charters, there's a percentage, and again, I'd have to look it up, but there's only a certain percentage of students outside of our district that they can take and it has to do with what's in the charter, and that means that the other district has to release them. And so districts have the ability to deny releasing students to charters outside of their district if it exceeds 3% of their total student population. So for example, Portland Public has kids who travel all the way out to go to Lupine Community Charter School. If they have several charters outside of their district boundaries, they have the authority to say we've exceeded that 3% who've left our district. It's different for kids who are in our district, who live in our district, but other districts have to release them, and then our charter agreement would have to allow a certain percentage of them. Usually districts would be happy to have other people's kids, but other districts don't want to let them go.
Yeah, so I guess the clarifying thing for me is that they, once they come to Gresham Arthur Academy, they are now completely our student.
Correct.
They are no longer. I was wanting to clarify that it was not still another district student, that we were just taking on the financial responsibility for, but we are taking on the whole student, and they are now Gresham-Barlow students.
And we claim the state funds for
Yeah.
that student and then pass portions.
Yes, that's exactly what I want.
Okay. So any other questions about that? Kind of sounds like a whole.
Well, I think especially with it being legislated right now, that's kind of a.
And still
Right,
figuring
yeah,
out, you know,
it's
what,
moment in time.
what are we contributing that would
Like-
impact our budget, you know, the amount.
Yeah.
So, because I know what we contribute, but, you know, what would it wind up being on our line?
It would be if we, yeah,
Still calculating.
that we're still calculating, but it would be, you know, there's about $500 to $1 million, depending on how you calculate things like transportation and special ed services and all the time when Tracy or me or somebody else does that kind of support Donna and remember and spends time. So, yeah.
I found it interesting that hearing today. It was only an OSBA that. Was in opposition of it, which I thought there'd be more districts or whatnot. Opposing it. So,
I think
probably not.
what we're hearing from COSA is there's so many bills being introduced this time that they've had to prioritize where they're focusing their efforts. And that wasn't one of them. It's not that they're in support or not, they just don't have the time.
And it is, something that the board and our leadership has to be aware of, because if that does pass, it will have a fiscal impact on us, for sure.
And not every district is affected by charters either.
That's right. A lot of the smaller districts throughout the state don't even have one, or they had small ones and failed. Yes, exactly.
Portland Public only now has 4 that they offer, they're the same, they're 4 to 5 times the size of us, and they have a full-time person who oversees their 4 + 2 state sponsored.
Is that a plug?
Well, no, I don't, it's not that, that's not the jam, that's the hill I wanna die on, but yeah, it is.
But I will say, they did figure out a lot of the wrinkles in doing charters, because they had a bunch that were like, really? You want a charter for that? So there was a lot of money that got spent in ways to explain what was different. So, any more questions for Carla? Okay, thanks. You don't have to stay. If I say you go, do you want to stay and hear this lovely presentation?
I've already contributed to it. Yeah, I'm out, yeah.
So we're gonna circle back now to our first, action item that we do not have to take action tonight, but it is going to be a review for us to be able to take action potentially the April business meeting.
Yes.
Yes, so this has, Dr. Klinger and Michelle Cook, who's still here smiling. 7:30.
She always smiles.
She's always.
All right, so
Okay.
integrated grants renewal first reading.
All right, I was like, I don't know.
And some of these we're gonna go through.
So
There's lots of.
we can go through as quickly as you'd like.
Okay.
And what I will say as we get started is after sitting through the school improvement plan process on Monday, a lot of this probably is pretty familiar because a lot of that work is directly supported by these grants. So when we did this before, we were calling it AF, Alignment for Student Success, and it's still what it says on the cover of the thing, but it's really our integrated grants. And all of these grants and the combination of work that we do is really connected to all the different elements of the board conditions, and you likely saw that on Monday night. So what's being asked of you? We are here because in April, we need you to approve our application to apply for the integrated grants again. Some important things to know is this totals about $16 million of funding for our district, and now includes the early literacy grant. So when we started the integrated grant process originally, early literacy hadn't started. It started kind of at that midway point. So now it's going to become one of these integrated grants. There's an extensive amount of community engagement that goes into this process and informing the work that we do. In 2023, we created a 4-year plan, and you approved that application and that grant ultimately when it was awarded. And so this is kind of that 2-year point where we revisit the budget, make some adjustments, do some kind of refreshing of the plan before we kind of move on for the next couple of years. And like I said, many of the things that you're going to hear about tonight are things connected to what you heard in school improvement plans on Monday.
What questions for Slotty want?
I guess my main
Either.
question that I hope to get answered is there anything new, or is this kind of what we've been presenting before? But just, again,
There is a little bit of new and there's not a lot of new.
Okay.
I'm wondering if maybe we could focus more on the new.
Yeah, and then my only question is, I don't know what extensive community engagement, who's the community and what's the. engagement?
We'll talk about
Okay,
that.
okay,
Yep, that
all
will
right.
be a part
Yeah,
of
so you
that.
got 2 things.
So I'm
that's
gonna
what
go
you're doing?
quickly then through
Okay.
some of these
Okay.
things, and you have the slides, and if you have questions, you know where to find me. So this is just really the ODE schedule around the timeline and the cycle for this. This is the plethora of different programs that are a part, sorry, Michelle, this is your slide.
That's okay.
Really a part of the different programs are there in the different colors there. The common elements are the different layers really related to the process of the grant application kind of oversight. And then you've got the goals there on the far right side.
Items with stars are the things that have been added this year,
Okay, perfect.
just to kind of call out what's different.
Perfect, because I could go too fast. Thank you.
No, that's great.
Yep.
Right, that's Old Bill's last thing before he left.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does it look familiar?
Yep, it is, and they've just kind of added on and built on.
So
How's
we don't
that?
have to submit 15 different reports, we can do one report. Yeah. Okay.
That's maybe a coffee conversation.
And maybe this is a different board meeting topic for in the future, to put on the list, but I'm just curious how that early literacy is going, because we voted that in, was it this year, or last year?
Last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
This is year 2.
Is it kind of meeting its goals?
Yeah, okay. So this piece is a little bit new. So Michelle, maybe spend a little time talking about this.
Yeah, so we updated this with the board conditions becoming part of our alignment piece. We updated this graphic to show that. You can see we've added early literacy. It's part of our instructional alignment. But what this really captures is the goals for the integrated grants are still the same. Our big buckets of focus are still the same. And so we just wanted to continue to show that alignment, because anytime we can get all the boats rowing in the same direction, we're more efficient and we're much more likely to move the dial. And so that's really, keeping alignment is super critical in this process, but we just wanted to update that and capture that and how it aligned to the board conditions.
So down at the bottom in the red are the goals of integrated grants. And when we started to talk about how these things align with the board conditions, we could have added arrows all over this place, so we just stopped.
Yeah.
So if you're like, well, really, I can see how, I can at least see how these things are connected. It's really multiple pieces of all of them.
So in the grant, there's very specific outcomes that need to be identified. Last time around, we had 4 key outcomes. And this year, with the addition of the early literacy grant, you can see we've added a 5th. And so really, these are sort of the North Star in terms of the things that we do. They're driving our activities, they're driving our strategies, all of those. And so we're really making sure that whatever we do, we're making sure that that stays true to that. Easy for lots of new pretty things to come along. And it's like, no, if it's not part of this, it's really helping us stay focused. And it makes it a lot easier to say no to things. Say, nope, it doesn't fit. We're gonna keep our focus here.
Blame it on OD.
There you go.
That's the
There
best
you go.
way.
So we added early literacy, and we also, so that 4th one, pre-K to post-secondary career pathways, the blue language is like that's the main core of the goal. That was the CTE access and outcomes that we used to always talk about. This is just a little broader language for us to be K-12 as we think about pathways, but still includes a lot of that same work. Okay, so I think this is where we can save a lot of time.
Okay. A lot of these, because our strategies are broad, but as we implement strategies, a lot of it has to do with going deeper and getting things, using your data to implement better and get more sustainability going for things. And so there's not a lot of changes here. There's some refinement of language. There was something in inclusive culture, I think that actually it was the next thing that we moved it down, because with some of the shifts in the bigger programs like career connected learning and having CCE, we massage some of that to hit that pathways K-12 to come honor that, as Tracy was just mentioning. The next one.
So you've got those 5 key outcomes that we'll talk about, and then each one has strategies, and most of the strategies haven't changed.
Yeah, which is a good point, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really allows us to go deeper, and that's really what we're focusing on, is going deeper and getting better at what we're doing. Again, so with instructional alignment, you know, a lot of the same things that we've seen before, not a lot of changes, not a lot of changes. What we'll have is the things we do and how we implement those is where we start. It's all the nitty-gritty that isn't necessarily captured here that gets really focused on. I'm trying to figure out how fast to go and how.
I know,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Because I
Go.
And I just
All right.
started looking.
I know, that's great. Moving on. Same thing, a lot of implementing, equity-driven multi-tier systems for, it's a huge stand-up. It's a 3 to 5 year on a really good day to get it really stood up and really running where you can begin to back off. And so every school is in a different place. We need every school where they are, and we just continue to refine based on what they need. But the buckets of work are still very much the same, and that's where we really are implementing Panorama. Fun data point that I didn't put in here. We just got some usage data in terms of people logging in. 98% of all administrators have logged in, and 94% of all staff with licenses have logged in.
That's amazing.
Doesn't mean we're in there every day, but we have been
They've
in
logged
there.
in.
So
You know how to
that,
get in.
no, that's a huge, that's not, that was huge.
One variable.
And we've had a couple schools where it's like month after month, we're seeing like 57% of users, a lot of, so we see that consistency, and you're like, okay, that's what we want to see is it's starting to weave into people's everyday work. We have a long way to go, but we're getting there.
Well, hopefully it's not one of those programs where you have to update your password all the time, because that would be my barrier. Okay, I log in. and-
Yeah, luckily Jeff's got us like links where it's like, it's the
Good.
single sign on. All right, so then looking at our, this is again where we made the adjustment, we can see that pre-K to post-secondary pathways, that third bullet, that really kind of broadens it beyond just the CTE program, really looking at that K-12 pathways program. And then for early literacy, this is new, and the strategies here are really focusing on that ongoing high quality professional learning for all staff. There's been a lot of work done the last couple of years, that you probably remember with really implementing ECRI 95%, looking at aligning how we provide interventions so that we're keeping our materials the same and we're differentiating based on strategies and intensifying instruction versus changing what we're doing. And that's where we're starting to see some good growth because of that alignment. And it's better for our students, our focus groups, because we're keeping things consistent. So they're hearing the same language in the classroom as they might hear in a small group. Those are instructional moves that really can make a difference for kids.
So the early literacy, I was thinking of the preschool program. Is that different than this?
It's different than this. Yeah.
Okay, so scratch that.
So you're
Yeah.
thinking preschool for all is what you'd like to.
So preschool for all, yes,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
So, but I have a question. So on the early literacy part, where we have students that are coming to us from different districts, different countries, different environments. So when they come in and they're not where students who've been with us for a few years, then does that resource allow us to provide targeted support for that? So that it's not something that says, well, you weren't here with us in second grade, so I guess you're in fourth grade now, deal with it. So we're able to do that forward and back.
No, I mean, yeah, we were just talking about this something the other day. When students come in, the first thing we do is get a sense of their literacy level. Where are you? And then we figure out what do you need instructionally. And there's a couple of strategic moves we've looked at, including serving students based on what is your instructional need, not based, are you in this program or that program? The alignment of the curriculum in terms of, you know, using equity and intensifying equity.
It's a new name.
And then with the addition of the high dosage tutoring, and we also through that grant have coaches that are providing an increase in specific coaching to our educational systems at the elementary level. A lot of that reading instruction and that support is coming through small groups. And so just by aligning things and streamlining it, we're able to have a lot more systematic professional development, deeper implementation. What we're doing is working better because we're getting better at doing it. And we've got the coaching and the consistency. So there's a lot of good things that have happened that have tightened up because of the grant. And kind of
Certainly. And I will say the early literacy grant is much more specific in the requirements of what you have to do to receive the grant. So all of these things are requirements within the grant that then we have to, you know, show our evidence of and all of those things. So it's all very much a part of that, like very systematic.
Yeah, it's very aligned with that.
So those are the 5 big outcomes and then some strategies for each one. So our outcomes then are broken down into strategies that are then broken down to activities, and activities are actually like, what are we actually spending money on? So the 2 things at the top are the 2 things that are new. The other things down below are things that have been a part of our grants for the last several years. And so I'll talk about those two things a bit. This is not an all-inclusive list by any means, but it gives you an idea of some of those big buckets that are covered as a part of the grant. So one of the things that we've been doing as we have worked through our budget process is look for opportunities to pay for more classroom teachers, frankly, out of our grants to protect some of our general fund and reduce our general fund. And we're able to do that through our student investment account money or SIA money. And so that's really what the top thing is about. Another example of that is like with PE, we added additional PE staff that helps reduce class size. So that's all part of an allowable use of student investment account.
So the question on the teachers.
Yeah.
Is that teachers reduce class size if our budget didn't have to decrease? Or is that factored all in and we will maybe have less students to teacher ratio with this grant application coming?
So we have, we'll be a little bit careful in how I talk about
Yes,
this.
I know it's a very.
So for example, an example I feel like I can talk about is curriculum purchases.
Okay.
Curriculum purchases.
We can talk about that.
We have been paying for our curriculum purchases over the last number of years through SIA. Our plan moving forward is we'd reduce that amount that we're spending on curriculum, and then we can repurpose that funding towards something else,
Got it.
which then could be classroom teachers. And so there's some of that that's been a part of our planning. And so although we have had classroom teachers as a part of our plan for the last several years, there is an increase in the number of teachers that are funded through SIA.
Cool.
Now, yeah, as we move forward as a part of this plan and this budget. Yep,
Nikki.
yep.
Nice job.
And then, the next one, high dosage tutors. So that's one of the things that's required in the early literacy grant. So we have that big outcome of early literacy. We have a requirement around providing tutoring. And so what we do as one of our activities is we hire high dosage tutors. So we have hired a classified assistant to work in each of our elementary schools. And they have some pretty specific rules that they can follow around the number of kids that they can have in a group and those sorts of things. But we're able to use ECRI in that small group instruction. That grant also pays for some of the instructional facilitators that come and coach the EAs that are doing that work. So that's just kind of an example of how this all kind of plays out.
And in using EAs, it's fairly structured to make sure that it's review and reinforcement of the instruction that's done by the licensed personnel.
Yeah, and they have a coach. So
And
there's a
coach,
coach
okay.
helping, a licensed coach
But
helps them with
it
that.
makes sure that they know what they're doing, they have that ability to be flexible and at the
Yep.
same time, not create something that's different and that it's not an integrated across everywhere else.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm
So-
just saying that for the,
General public,
yes.
And so high dosage tutors, this is the first year that we've been able to do that. So every one of our elementary schools has some of that support. And that's something that will now be a part of these integrated grants. Okay. So then moving forward, they do have us, they do evaluate us on the grant. They look at the same measurements that are really a part of your board conditions. So I believe those 5 things are familiar to you. We set growth targets for that data, and we'll look at that in just a second. We will be working with ODE. They work alongside us to develop appropriate growth targets, because the goal is that we're meeting those targets, not that our target is 100% and that we may or may not ever get there, but like realistic growth targets. And then once we have those established, then we'll report back to the board to get those approved. So there's a whole lot of data.
We were gonna go
Here.
over square by square.
No, we're not. No, we're not. We're really, we're gonna focus on the left-hand side. Let's focus on the left-hand side, really. So this is just an example. This is actually from they call it the RAD, where we collect and monitor our data. And so the main thing here to see is if like you look at for your cohort graduation, they ask us to look at our baseline target. So for all of our students, so what is our minimum increase that we'd like to see? They have a stretch target. So how would we push ourselves a little bit more? And then they also have a gap closing target. So how are we trying to close the gaps that we may have for different focal groups in our system? And And as we move into this application process, we'll add 2 more years of growth targets. So here, yes, the green doesn't show up very well, but if you look at this, the good news on that far right hand, that is all a very light colored of green because we met growth targets in all of our indicators this year. And we have the greatest amount of growth for those gap closing targets. So looking at our gap closing target for graduation was 5.3, for 5-year completion, 3.6, for 9th grade on track, 3.8, for language arts, 3rd grade language arts, 7%, and then for attendance was higher as well. So we are making progress in all of those groups, which means now we're gonna be tasked with having to update some of our numbers because we've met some of our targets that are a few years out. Questions about that? Just know that we're digging into all the
I
data.
did have a question, but you might have answered it, so I'll just clarify. The study before this, those are not then our current targets for that 2025, 26, 27, 27, 28. That's
Those
an
are,
example, so those will change.
no, these are our targets. These
Okay.
are our current targets. When we set them 2 years ago, we set them for 5 years. So
Okay.
these are the targets that we set a few years ago, but some of them we've surpassed.
Yeah, so will we update those going forward?
We're currently hearing not now, because they're really trying to look at this as an overall system shift, because remember, every group of kids, every next year when we look at this data, it's a different group of kids.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at the big picture, so what you can't see is there's another column, there'll be 2 more columns that we'll add, so when we bring this back to you, we'll have growth targets out to 2030. And so, and it's a gradual increase, because they're really looking at this as a long.
Although
System shift.
9th grade, 3rd grade attenders will be a new group, but 4-year cohort and 5-year cohort would still be the same, right?
Because every, because they'll have exited the system.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really about incremental growth over time
Yeah.
and we want, I mean, just like, we're like, oh yay, it's all green. We are still gonna want it to be all green and to be improving.
To put what you were saying in a different way is, this is also looking at long-term sustainability of the systems that we put in.
Right.
And changing every year based on a cohort probably doesn't make sense, because then it's not an institutionalized system, which is what you want.
I guess my point in saying that is not to change the system, but
Right.
to continue to challenge
Agreed.
ourselves to increase.
Agreed, yeah.
Even if that's a within district
Absolutely.
challenge and not what we're.
So just because we said about 82%, and that's
Yeah,
what we.
well, we've made it, we don't need to do
Yeah.
anything
We
for
don't,
5 years.
but it proves
Oh, I
that our
agree.
system works and we can have those students. Make even more growth.
Yeah.
And what I don't know is how our conversation with ODE, when we set our next 2 years of targets, how that might be different from 2 years ago. They really encouraged us to be realistic and we had been way more ambitious than they coached us to be.
Yeah, I
And
remember,
so,
I think we talked about this last.
We
time
did.
In 2023-ish.
Mhm.
Because some of those numbers were higher than this, and I
Yeah.
do remember it would be in a district conversation, and then when you went to ODE, it was adjusted to be more realistic, so
yep,
I guess as long as we still have that goal.
Yes.
For the public to know, like, we are still challenging ourselves, and obviously the goal is 100%.
and I
This is the
think
realistic.
with some of the initiatives happening at the state level around accountability, we want to be meeting our goals so that we are maintaining
Well, and meeting the
oversight of our funds.
reasonable.
Yeah,
And I think, because I think that's, because if we said, well, 65% would be, so they want us to make sure that we have stretch in it, so.
And we also have other assessments we're using that are measuring like our benchmark assessments. And that's where a lot of times we are pushing hard on those. Because that's where we start to really close the gap, especially like at the elementary level. If we can get kids, at reading, where they need to be by 3rd grade, they're now on a trajectory that's gonna show up in these later years much stronger.
Yeah, sure. So that's where all of our dibbles conversations and our iReadies still remain really important.
Yeah.
But that we have it included in this plan formally, yeah. Okay, so this is where we start to get into a little bit more about the application.
Yeah, and this was intended just to show like what does the grant application actually look like and what is ODE looking for? And so they have lots of questions within their different goal areas. And this is an example, and of course, they want 250 words or less, which is always a challenge when you're sharing all the things. And so really the application questions are more reflective. They're prompting the district teams to think about how do we center equitable outcomes in our students, in our work with students, and describing what's in place, what's missing, and what are your next steps. So it's really sort of a reflective process, but it's going very deep and it's going very wide into the systems that we have in place. And that's where our alignment planning for student success team does a lot of gathering this and compiling it, and a lot of just, you're getting information from all over the place to pull it together.
And a lot of these questions were the same as last time, and they've auto-loaded the answers
Yeah,
again,
and
so a
then-
lot of it really.
Are
did
you
not
able to
change.
copy and paste from last time?
Some of it.
But a lot of it, it's interesting because the work is evolving, and so we need to update it because the work is evolving. Yeah, and the application also has us updating, I guess that's the next one, artifacts.
This is Chris's question.
Yeah,
the
this is,
engagement.
yeah, and so part of the work, when we first did this 2 years ago, we were learning a lot about how do we grow our engagement practices to be more and involving, collaborative and even deferring. And I think tonight, having this student panel here, this is a great example of a different kind of engagement. And so then these past 2 years, as we've been engaging in the work, there's opportunities like the transformative SEL. The level of student engagement and staff engagement was much more comprehensive than perhaps maybe it would have been, 4 years ago. Well, that was COVID, 6 years ago. And so we've really just adapted that. And so what ODE asks us to do is to upload artifacts that show how we have done engagement differently. And so we found that instead of going, oh my gosh, we were like, oh wow, we've done a lot of this because we've really tried to work hard at adapting that and really showing where student voice shows up. And I think a piece that, as we continue to grow, then how do we communicate back to people that have given us input, what we've done with that? So there's a lot of opportunity.
Those are obviously not live links or.
On your screen, they're not live
Is
links.
there, is this on our website?
Not at, no, but I think there's probably an opportunity for us, if you want to see some of these things, we can send a follow-up in the superintendent's update.
We can, but I also think,
Mhm.
can we put it on the website so people can do the live ones? I don't think it's public record.
I think we can certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to, some of these I'd like to, because I was doing the same thing.
There's a lot of good
People
information
are
there.
curious and the
Yeah.
community too have a place to go and.
Community engagement.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the important points is you could do this integrated grant process and do some like community engagement night that's all about just the grant. And that would be one way to approach this. That's not the approach we've taken because we really want it to be authentic work that is a part of how we do business in our district in terms of engaging with families and staff and students. And so that's what we're also trying to represent here is how we're changing our practice, not just for a grant application, right?
Right. And then this last piece, when you think about like grading and, what's it called, grading and whatever, blending funding, those pieces. This is literally a snapshot again of part of this planning process where you can see our outcomes and our strategies. And then the columns over on the right are literally like the different funding sources. And those, I can tell you all the names if you really want to know, but I think you kind of get the big idea. But what the big idea here is like, for example, outcome B, you can see that for that first strategy, utilize updated and culturally relevant instructional materials in the classroom. There's two primary funding sources for that, high school success and SIA. And so that's a way of kind of showing how by bringing the funding sources together, we're able to sustain those critical practices, especially thinking about now where we are with, okay, as we think about, shuffling and, what are the things that are key priorities? And this process really says, these are your strategies. How can you have some flexibility to maintain those critical things when funding can waver? Because sometimes you have money that you need to reduce, other times money comes in. And either way, this is the North Star of these are the things that we're investing in. And so that sort of helps with sustainability over time in a state where funding is kind of like this.
So then I have a big question about this, and this is a question that has come up probably for at least the last time. Because you put the word budget on there. Where, one of our previous CFOs, maybe two of our previous, tried to kind of align a little bit where there was funding
and it was in the budget, and how did you know? Without getting into too much of this nickel went here, that dime went there. But that's been a question, because the way that our budget shows and the way that our budget is presented to the community, it doesn't talk about this. It talks about a very big bucket. And so there really isn't as tight a way to see if you were just looking into the budget. How would you know from a very different viewpoint that that's what happened and that you were successful with it? And I think we've had different ways that different CFOs approached it. And that has been asked by budget committee members as well. And we tried to keep them away from line item stuff because that's too hard. But again, if it's coming up to here, how is that being tracked against a budget that doesn't have that information filled out?
I mean, it's a great question. I think it just gets more and more complex as we add more and more grants. Because you have these lumps of money that get represented in a lump form in your budget, your adopted budget, right?
And in particular, when we talk about where we're gonna need to make cuts, and someone will look at a lump piece and say, well, we can take some out of that, or we'll use it over here. And we say, no, that's already reserved. How do I know that? And that's sort of that, I want people to ask a question, but then I also wanna know, well, how do I?
Yeah, and I think that's where in the budget message, it does kind of outline like the key priorities, the outcomes and some of that, but it just doesn't get to that level.
No.
And
I don't know how.
There's this,
the previous
and yet
CFO
there's this
tried to do
other
that.
layer of oversight with quarterly reporting and, you know,
And
all these
somebody
other
wants to know the
pieces.
number. If they said this much money is allocated to this activity, then where do we show that in the end of how did that work? And that's probably a big question.
And that comes out, I guess I'm not sure if in the annual report that I do in November, there was like big picture budget again, but not the details.
Right.
With basically having a couple of categories, state, school fund, grants. Federal dollars, just kind of like three big buckets, would that be maybe being what you're asking?
It's getting
for?
closer, but it's even more, if we're talking about early literacy and how much
Oh.
money did we spend and how did that impact? How could we say we spent $1 million? And here was what the outcome of that was.
So
And here's
something
what the
that might
resources.
help.
I was just thinking
Yeah,
about the
and
same
here's
thing.
the resources that had to go into that to make sure that
Yeah.
that money was spent. It's all connected, but the buckets are a little bit too big in that, because how would you show, we had to put a little bit more money in K-5
Yeah.
versus 6-8, and then back to 11.
So one of the things that we've been talking about is with this plan, how do we have it more visible for people? And so there's some examples from a couple of districts where it has those key outcomes. It has the total grant amount that SIA is this much, that high school success is this much, and kind of lays that out, and it does have some outcome data connected to it. So there's kind of a plan on a page, or maybe it's two, that we've talked about. Once we get this plan done, how do we have something that's easy to access on a website that helps make some things make sense of this? Now that we know more about how this is all working, and that might help.
Or when
with a
people say,
piece
well,
of
you got a
that.
whole bunch of money to do an important function, where does that show up? And if you talk about cutting, again, it's just that whole bigger piece of how does it all come together?
Yeah, and it's so complex because each of those, however many grants or state programs at the beginning, where they're 10 or 12, each have different rules.
And different.
So for
timelines,
someone to
different
understand
buckets.
all the
Right.
different rules and
Right.
implications of all those things is.
Possibly
complex.
even just, on the budget, you know, when it's, staffing, whatever, that's a very basic example. Somehow marking that there are staffing paid for by this. Equipment is paid for by this, like, so that even just visually, people can see these things are funded by multiple different things. I mean, and this shows that a little bit, you know,
Yeah, because
that
it's
can
not
correlate
related
over.
Fund,
Yeah, if that
Yeah.
could correlate over to the budget, even if it was marked with a letter or color, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah,
To
I
show
don't
the
know
multiple
how-
funding sources, because
Yeah,
otherwise, I think the assumption from the community is just that there is one source.
yeah.
And that is very much not true.
Yeah.
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 But
I
They
think
don't
some of
understand all
that
the
will come out in
intricacies.
budget 101 a little bit in terms of the different funding sources. Within the budget,
Yeah.
within the budget like book though, the budgeting is so high level
Right.
that it's not specific anyway.
Right.
So then I don't know that you could get to the nuance of some of the, like this is 4.5 PE teachers and it's.
Right, and I think.
But it's staffing, it's transportation, those would still be big buckets, so it wouldn't say the amount, but just that just making people aware. This bucket has multiple funding sources. I don't know if that's
And
possible.
I think
Budget
it becomes
content.
more of an issue when we do have to talk about reducing some parts of the budget. And so it's like, well, you're reducing over here, but you're still showing $1 million over there. Well, because that money is earmarked for specific things and it supports these things or these people or little bits of that support these people. It's just trying to get enough information.
So for example, we have engagement liaisons that work in our middle schools. And this is the complexity of the budgeting. And because of the rules of Measure 98, the 8th grade support can be paid for out of high school success in Measure 98. But the 6th and 7th grade support can't. So in one building, you can have one person who 2/3 of their salary is paid for by one grant and another third's paid for by another grant to follow the rules, right? So it's just.
And we have to show an outcome of those rules.
Yeah, it's mind numbing.
And it's minutia at its best, because when, we also have, the same is true for even teaching in different content areas. Somebody's licensed to teach in both, they're teaching both, you have to account for that, has to be reported that way.
Yeah.
But I will try to think through that
Your brain
lens
around that.
as we dig in and get that budget book in April. What is actually in there and what could be represented differently or what could be a summary follow-up? I don't know. I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around.
Yeah, and it may be that you look at it and say. It is what it is. But I know the questions come up.
Absolutely.
And again, it seems to come up more when we do have to cut. And what is the impact on the cuts?
And even supplemental, if there is not a way to overlay it with the budget, because I understand the complexity of that. Even if there was a supplemental document that had each grant and the amount of that grant and the types of things that went towards, it would at least give people a bigger picture. It wouldn't be overlaid, but at least it would give people an understanding of the complexities, whether they wouldn't then understand exactly how it worked, but they would understand that you are working.
The objects are
And
different
that
for
we
every
can't
grant.
take money A
Someone's
and
working
put it in
through it.
pot B.
Yeah.
Is also the other issue that people see. And why can't we use it? And then here's why.
And
Because that's
sometimes we
targeted.
just have to explain
Right.
whatever that is in the moment.
Okay, all right, I belabored it enough.
Yeah. But you're right, it's
Yeah.
super complicated and it takes a team of us to really wrap our brains around it and manage it.
All right, and then we have a board game to play.
Yeah.
Best lines in resource, anyway, the OT gave us, I didn't create this, just let me be clear about that. So, just so that you know kind of where we are in the process, so each, you're hearing this tonight kind of as a first reading. And so, we'll come back to you at the April 2nd board meeting, and once this plan is approved, then it goes to ODE. And then they have a process, they're gonna have a quality assurance learning panel that reviews. Quality assurance learning panel that goes through and reviews all the grants.
Beyond that panel.
Yeah, there's some people.
A
that like
notice
that
just
stuff.
came out from ODE if you'd like.
If you'd like to, yeah, there you go. Did I get paid?
No.
Yeah.
Volunteering time.
All right, yeah. And so after OE's reviewed it and well, I don't know, what we call it, the QALP group, we'll also engage in the co-development of the longitudinal performance growth targets with ODE. And then the grant agreements will come out and then there'll be another reading we'll be presenting to the board. So there's a whole structured process. We went through this last time. So that's just a timeline in case you're excited to know that.
From here to there, is this June?
It could be June, even the growth target meetings could be into the summer. And so they were kind of squishy on spring to summer and,
So
yeah.
maybe a September or something.
We're not sure, yeah,
You never know.
you just never know, yeah. So we're just staying as far ahead of it, and on top of it as we can and be ready for what comes.
We know the applications due April 30th.
April 30th, yes.
So.
Yeah,
So that's the first
and
part. If we want to
we
create-
know where we're gonna put all the information and, you know.
That's
we're
the
teed
next
up for
step,
that.
April 30th.
Yeah, April 30th, so. Yeah, anyway, so what's being asked is we're gonna come back at the April 2nd board business meeting, and they'll be asked, you know, for approval of the plan. And then those are just some of the highlights in terms of the total. We really, I hope we answered your question about community engagement and how that's something different. And that it aligns with board conditions, and so we see a super great alignment, in this work, so.
And if people have questions between now and then, send them our way, because April, we would really just plan to say, hey, remember we talked about this, now it's time for the action, unless there's something that we're missing, we keep that short.
So let's just see if David's still awake.
What,
We've
like,
got lots of acronyms.
mind
we've
numbing.
thrown out there, but
It's hard because I can hear all you guys. It's with the thing up, you guys are so tiny, I can't see anybody. But I am definitely engaging.
All right, that's it.
So that will come to us.
There you go.
Hi.
We are.
Hey.
All right. Well, when they do the presentation, we wind up being a little bitty.
Yeah.
So, okay, so next up, I believe we're going in order. Policy review, first reading, pretty short this time, Tracy.
Yes.
You wanna,
My notes real quick.
yeah,
Yes, we have. It's 4 policies. Most of which have some kind of. Legislative or legal adjustment to them. So the first one is the board member standards of conduct. And it seems, it was pretty straightforward to the team. It did, leave us reaching out to OSBA regarding a kind of a cousin policy, which is BDBDA, which is board meetings, I think, for a little bit of follow-up to see if there's anything that we need to look at there, but really, this policy seems pretty straightforward.
Is the highlighted language, I know, is that us implying this, like us putting our words into it, or is that?
The
That's the
OSBA's recommendation,
recommendation.
yep,
Yes.
Okay.
and so highlighted is new language, obviously strikes are strikes. And then sometimes they have brackets,
Which
this
is
one
optional.
has a bracket at the end, so that means it's optional, to include a footnote on the second page. Usually a legal reference, so that one was very straightforward. The next one was sick time, and we did have, one of our HR professionals look through this to give us some feedback, so there's some added language there. There is some bracketed language, but it aligns with our practice, and some of it's just clean up with some of the different changes that have happened related to leaves and use of sick time. Same thing with paid family and medical leave insurance. Some cleanup language there. We still have that weird. It's not a footnote if it's up at the top, but on 1B, beginning of the sentence, we need to figure out that, but. Pretty straightforward. One of the big changes, you see a bunch of strike on the second page for serious health condition. On the top of page 3, it's summarized into just bullet points and the legal stuff. And then admission of resident students, this was all pretty standard as well. Where we did have some discussion is at the top of page 2 around expulsions. And so the policy committee selected the word may, so the district may deny regular school admission to a student who has become a resident student around expulsion, whether they have a weapons, something, or if it's not related to weapons. So we did May
Is
on both
there
of
a
those on
reason
79.
why we're choosing the district instead of the district board? Because the ORS says board,
Where is that again?
it's the top of page.
That's actually, that's actually an OSBA change.
Because
It's probably one of those where it's not exactly a semantic, but the board, sorry, the district is in charge of admissions and the board accepts the recommendation. The only time the board gets directly involved in a student is in an expulsion hearing, where the board can overrule the recommendation.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's really the district that's making the decision, and then the board is accepting the recommendation or asking questions about the recommendation.
We did have one scenario where it requested to be in our district. Or no, to leave the district. And that came to the board as an appeal.
Where we did not, maybe we had denied
Yeah, then we,
releasing them.
not so to a charter.
I don't
school,
remember
but
that, but
I don't remember, I just remember it.
Yeah.
I've only.
It was a few years ago. It was a really wonky situation. It was
Okay.
either they were wanting to come in. Or wanting to
Probably
leave.
wanting to go, I mean, why,
And it wasn't to a charter school, it was to a different district.
I don't know.
I guess, yeah, that question I had, and then the other question is on the, weapon with, in light of our safety current situation, not just our district, but
Yeah.
city, state, nationally, is there a reason why we wouldn't want to say we will deny and then have the option to allow as opposed to it being the other way?
I think that's what we interpret may to mean, that we may provide them enrollment. Our current practice is that we don't. But could there be a circumstance where we may want to consider that?
In particular.
I don't know what that would be, but we might.
We have
So
the
we saw it
virtual
more as a, that
and-
leaves it, our default has been
Okay.
to not, but could there be a situation?
But. I think I see Holly's point. If you have that, you will deny. That's strong language and that's unfightable by a parent.
Right.
But then if you have a may, then that's potentially a lawsuit.
That's a fight.
And that's a fight. And so I would almost err on the side of, we will deny.
Are we all looking at 9?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if
Or,
I'm,
sorry, I was
Well,
looking.
I guess 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9.
7 is
Mhm.
if for a reason other than a weapons.
Well,
It's
okay, but-
And so
seven,
yeah.
what,
And 9
give me an
is
example
for a
of
weapons.
what that would look like.
a kid, cause each district does different things with expulsion, so I'm pulling one out here. Some districts, if it's a pattern of severe behavior, may move to expel or may be upheld. We also uphold that expulsion, we always have. This though, sometimes, I guess it's giving the latitude to say that that may have not been a great decision by the other district, and we're gonna put you on a contract and we're gonna uphold this, and maybe we do need to give you a second chance. But with that understanding that we will have a kid on a contract, and then we would reinstate that expulsion if necessary.
I could maybe understand a may for like the non-weapons charges, like drugs, whatever. But I don't know, I feel kind of
Well, the
concerned.
weapons is shall,
What's that?
the weapons is shall deny. Number 8.
May.
No, it's.
It's may.
Number 9.
9 is the,
9 is the weapons one.
9's,
Yeah.
well, 7 and.
Oh, is
Yeah.
8 and 9?
8 and 9.
8 has shall deny,
For
who is
at least
under
one.
expulsion from another school district for a weapons policy.
That's
I
true.
get,
8
they're
says
all, they all involve a weapons policy violation. All
Yeah.
No,
Well,
number
one
7
is for
doesn't.
reasons
7 is
other
others
than.
Yeah.
Oh,
Other
other
than,
than,
Yeah, so 7 is other than and it's vague. And then 8 is shall deny if it's from another, and
So
9 says.
Number 9 is
may
about
provide
providing an alternative
programs.
program,
So
which
it may
by
not
law
be
we
school,
have to do.
it May not be in a
Right.
school building.
Could be
Any
a
kid
number of
that's
things.
expelled,
because
we
they
have to
become a
provide.
resident student.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
so we do have to provide that option. What would that be? It could be a number of things.
It says. no.
Mhm.
Which means
Okay,
it might
does
as
that
well
clear it
just
up
say
for you,
will,
Tom? Is that better?
because
Yeah,
required. We
That's a
may
good point.
Oh,
not,
so
we
8 is,
will.
okay.
8 is the
It is a
weapon,
weapon that
and it's
says
a
no,
shall,
It says
we
shall.
will do that.
And then 7 is the may.
May
And
provide,
that
so
makes
then
more
may
sense.
make sense there.
because it's something other than weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then, I don't know, I kind of like leverage, and so I wouldn't put a will provide, because there may be a situation where
Yeah.
it's too dangerous or whatever, and it is a may, you know, it could be that. Yep, sorry. Yep,
That was a good one to talk through. So are
I
we
agree.
good with may, like we may honor a non-weapons expulsion?
Yep.
And we may provide alternative programs.
Yeah, may. And bait is shall deny.
Shall deny.
For weapons.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Ooh, glad we talked through that.
Okay.
So those are the four.
Yeah.
Are there any
Alright.
questions about that or put that on that consent agenda?
No,
Oh, okay.
that just took a lot of thought process.
Good thought process, though.
I could have read it right in the first place and it probably would have helped.
Yeah, so consent agenda for the April meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
fine with that.
All right, and do we have to, I mean, it's under action items, but we don't actually vote on that, we
Right.
just. No formal act, we
Yeah,
just
it
move
says
it
that.
forward,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
That's the action.
that's the action is moving it forward, all right, so.
we did
we've
C1.
done That.
Still on the budget.
Let's see, Michelle, do you need to stay for the budget?
You are
welcome. We love having you here. Have to make a big
You're
introduction.
gonna feel left
Oh,
out,
no.
just to say.
Yeah, throw your papers in the air and run. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have two more. Oh, God, there's a couple more.
Well, we did one
And
of
this is, so we have budget update, paperless meeting software, resolution.
Yep.
Okay,
This one's John.
yep.
Yes.
Mr.
Budget update discussion. Super.
I've been called in.
What?
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, David, it's gonna get small again for a second.
And Sarah, I think our finance team is maybe in the waiting,
Are they-
in case we need
Are
them.
they?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're just there for backup.
Yeah, look at that.
Okay, well, let me promote them because they won't be able to talk if they're.
What?
Hey, don't hang out. Does Sarah need to weigh in too?
Sarah, no.
Okay. We'll just leave.
Yep. So this item is, because we're walking delicately again, because we want to make sure the budget committee is able to do the budget committee's work. This is really about updating you all where we are on the ending fund balance, because the ending fund balance is board policy. That's within your control. So tonight, and Tracy will be doing, we put the presentation together. Wow. She'll take the lead on a lot of this, and especially with me missing that last week, I wasn't as well versed as she was coming into this. So we'll move on to that second slide in there, Sarah. And Tracy's got it. Wow, okay. Like it says, we're updating on you on projected ending fund balance for this year and the next 2 years of that biennium coming up. It's just a reminder, our costs have gone up. You have a question? Oh, I thought you were gonna, gotcha. Our costs have gone up, transportation's gone up, utilities, labor, recent deficit spending, due to a large ending fund balance has caused our costs to go up. Persistent inflation and declining enrollment is also really part of this too, because we keep having that slow, steady downturn. Tracy will take on the fund balance and has
So,
highlighted some things.
This is, you recognize this is the policy, so just to be clear about what the policy says. That red underline there, it's an ending fund cash balance of at least 8%. So that's the part to pay attention to, is the at least 8%. Because that's part of what we need to talk about some tonight. At the bottom of that policy, underneath with all these footnotes, are some other guiding numbers to be aware of. So the GFOA, the Government Finance Affairs Association, says no less than 5 to 15%. So there's a range there for us that we could consider. Similarly, the OASBO, Oregon Association of School Business Officials, recommends 3 to 8%. And then down on number 3, there's this kind of caveat of if there's available resources in other funds, then you can reduce the amount of unassigned fund balance or the ending fund balance if needed. So in some ways, some of this language contradicts the language above. But it might give us an opportunity for some conversation about what this starts to look like as we're facing the situation we're facing this year.
Are you, am I reading into it correctly that we may be doing another policy shift around this? Is that kind of the ask?
Discussion.
I think there's some things for us to weigh. I don't know that it has to be a policy shift.
Okay.
But there needs to be some guidance, I think, from the board in terms of if that's an approach, if just knowing that we're working towards a different goal or in a different parameter is a guidance. We're kind of looking for guidance around this, given the complexity of where we're at right now. So just as a little research project, we looked at where neighboring districts really are in terms of their policy. So you can see, you know, we are one of 2 districts that are in that upper end. Portland does have a minimum of 5%, but an expectation of 5 or of 10. So there's some different ways to look at that. So thinking about where we had been with our previous policy of 5% and where we're at with 8% now, like that's a reasonable range in terms of what neighboring districts have in their policy for what that's worth. John, this is you.
Thank you. Things that I want you to keep in mind, as we go down this discussion are, we're working on building a budget related to 11.36, which is the governor's budget. Of course, the budget committee still gets to make a determination on what they want to do, but that's where the center of our work has been. Moving from a 5 to an 8% ending fund balance when we made that decision, which I think was a very good decision. So don't hear anything other than that was prudent and it's the right way to go. But that was the equivalent of about $4.9 million. And that came out of what we had in reserve at that time. And a budget committee calendar adjustment does require board action. So if we end up making that decision, that's for you guys to make. We would have some recommendations for you, obviously, but that is in your purview. Okay.
Just like keep in mind.
The 11.3, I think there was a budget update or maybe state school fund update this week or is
Last week.
Is that the 11.36?
It has not changed from what I have heard. And the the March revenue forecast came out Wednesday, the week before March. It was like February 26th. It showed a small increase in revenue and $270 million in a big budget like that. It is a small increase, but it didn't show a decrease.
So I guess ultimately the 11.36 is the most recent data that we have to work on.
And as we move through this, we'll talk a bit, what if that number goes up at the state? We'll talk
That's
about
gonna
that a
come in a
bit.
bit. Yeah.
So just to kind of lay the landscape, where are we at? So this slide is our projected ending fund balance for this year. So you can see the red circle is we anticipate ending the year at 7.15%. That is without doing some of the special revenue transfers for technology and for curriculum. So that's an important part to know in all of this. It also doesn't reflect some of the things we're doing now to try to save some money that may benefit us and increase this ending fund balance by the end of the year. So this is kind of looking at January actuals, which is that middle column, and where we kind of thought we'd be in January with a few adjustments. That gets us to about 7% at the end of this year. So keep that kind of in mind. This year's budget plays into next year's and it just kind of rolls, right? with ending fund balance.
In the legislature right now would not affect that. correct?
Right.
Because that's
That's this
Okay.
school year.
Yep.
Yep. So just kind of, this is where we are in this moment. So we think we'll end up close-ish to 8% at the end of all of this without
I want to make
surprises.
one correction to our slide. I typed in 11.38, the governor's proposed budget was 11.36. Since we're at work session, I want to make sure that's accurate.
You were correct.
Yep.
Well, let's put that on record too. I was on,
We just delete that here.
thank you.
So.
And nobody's watching except.
That's true. Thank goodness.
This will be posted.
Yeah, good news. Okay, so this is where the conversation starts to shift a little bit. So this shows the next biennium. So year one, 25, 26, year two, 26-27. This also reflects the reductions that we have already been working towards. About $8.5 million of reductions gets us to this point. So, with us rolling those reductions into the second year, you can see what happens with ending fund balance. So we end next year at about 7.5%. And again, this is dependent on where we end this year, right? So we're anticipating about 7.5%. And that leaves us in the second year of the biennium at about 5%.
So we're, to clarify, we're basically still overspending and using our ending fund balance as small percentages. And so at some point, we're gonna have to come to real. And
Yes. There are, and this is also reflective of, and this will come in the end too, is our costs continue to go up. I mean, every year there's percentage increases, there's COLAs, there's things like that. So it's not that we're overspending like we were because we had a big ending fund balance.
Yeah.
But you are correct that our costs, just by doing business, are gonna continue to go up.
So what I'm gonna show you, so this is really thinking about, is there a way for us to stay in that 5 to 8% range for the next biennium? What could that look like? Without us having to make additional cuts in the second year. Ideally, we would make the cuts that we need to make now so that we're not doing this again next year. It's painful for staff. There's all the anxiety, all the different pieces. So is there a way to do that that still leaves us financially stable and healthy as a district? And the difference really is those costs just increasing the following year is what drops that to the 4.93.
In the second biennium.
In the second year of the biennium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Less also.
Yep.
Yeah.
So still within those recommendations and some of those minimums that were in the bottom of the policy, but not in alignment exactly with our policy. So we're gonna kind of walk through the implications of this. The other thing with this is assuming, again, that 11.36. So if that comes in at 11.4 or 5, that pads this a little bit more. If the special education cap goes up, that pads this a little bit more. So in some ways, this is kind of that like
worst case.
basement, kind of worst case. I hate to kind of say worst case
Because
scenario.
we never know. We actually had that in the slide at one point and we took it out.
Worst case scenario, is what if. But really, it's kind of the floor for us to build on. So you can probably see where we lean in all of this, but let's lay this out a little bit more. So on the left, if we maintain a minimum 8% balance for both years of the next biennium, we would need to reduce an additional $3.1 million now. So on top of the 8.5 that we've already reduced, we would be looking for 3 more million. So 11.5. That would leave us with 9.15% in year one of the biennium and would keep us at that 8% for year two of the biennium. If we got additional funding from special education or from a higher state school fund allocation, we would likely need to add that back in staff because of the 3 million additional dollars we've had to cut. That's gonna have to be staff.
Is that about 25 teachers or so, that 3.1 million? I mean, if you put
Yeah.
it in teachers, I mean, there's other places you can figure.
Yeah. So we would add back staff. That does give us the 8% goal, but it means pretty impactful cuts now on top of what we've already identified. And because we would need to identify $3 more million of cuts, we would need to adjust the budget calendar because we would have more work to do around what are we cutting. Okay, so this is if we want the minimum of 8%. If we maintain a range of 5 to 8%, we would reduce an additional $600,000 now, and we've identified what that could be, and that's reflected in the numbers already. That's what leaves us with 7.5% in that first year, just about 5% in the second year. And then what we were just kind of saying before these slides, if there's additional funding that comes through this legislative process, whether it's special education, state school fund, whatever it might be, we wouldn't hire with that money. We would put it in our ending fund balance. We would do some more of our special revenue transfers, which again are turf and tech and curriculum, and build up some of those funds for knowing that we're gonna need them. So that's a really important difference between these two that would take really careful communication. If all of a sudden the state's saying we're getting a bunch more money, people all of a sudden are gonna think, oh, well, that means we're hiring. It wouldn't for us in this case, because we would have a greater responsibility for making sure we're financially stable and making sure we have that cushion.
And this also, we've always been very good about our budgeting and staying even keel moving forward. This sets us up for what's anticipating to be another biennium challenge.
And that's my concern, if we're at 4% and we're overspending, sorry.
Right. And doing the boom, 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 back and forth.
Yes.
part. What did we get down to in 2008?
One day, $300,000.
We're not doing.
We're not gonna do that
Okay,
again.
so, no, okay, I remember that it was
No.
not.
And
it
to
was
that
like a
point,
rounded
Chris, like, if you look at this, this is still, even 5% is $8.6 million. It's not, it's still a hunk of money for us.
However, on a day-by-day basis, that's how many days?
Divide, our costs are about 640,000 a day, so that would give us 11 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for the, I think that's
Yeah,
good information for
important.
the public to hear,
Yes.
because that number sounds very, very
It
big.
does.
But in the cost of doing business on a day-to-day basis, that is
Yes.
not very many days, and for
I think the
at
13.
home, you would not budget with 11 days, and you would hope to not,
Right, absolutely. And even the 13 million for 8% is 21 days.
Yeah.
Now, my question, on the slide that we were, that's 600K now,
Mhm.
is that reducing what we have in the budget this year by 600,000, or is it? I mean, like, where is that factored in?
It probably doesn't actually need to be on this slide,
Okay.
honestly, because it's already a part of, it's already factored into these numbers here.
Oh, gotcha.
It's already a part of that, but it was an additional cut that we had to identify last week. So for us, it's like, oh, we've got to find $604,000.
Yeah, which is a lot.
So,
Yeah.
So a 5 to 8% range is really about a longer term plan to build ending fund balance. It does give us more stability with staffing right now with significant cuts that are already going to happen. And it's still within the recommendations. With a 5 to 8% range, we could maintain our current budget calendar. And if we had to, we could cut in the second year. We don't want to. But if we had to, for some reason, if we didn't get more funds this year or something else, worst case scenario started to happen, we could make additional cuts next year. And that is less than ideal for sure. I was looking at my notes to make sure. I literally wrote not ideal. Okay, this is you, but you might want your notes.
If we knew you would want a recommendation from us, we also know that we don't control that. We're thinking that if we had a range of 5 to 8%, we can work within that and we can do a pretty good job. If that was reflected in board policy, obviously your all's choice and we'll work with whatever you give us. We just talked about we haven't brought in federal implications yet either. We may end up having to reduce anyway, based on what's happening. We just don't know. So that it could be moved. On the other hand, the policy still could read 5 to 8%. And in that case, if there's more reductions to make, that may help us. The other, and like I said just before, the next biennium is really not looking good. And it might make this biennium look easy. So we need to know that too.
So, just for a little bit of how our ending fund balance was bigger than some of the other districts. Some of that was a deliberate,
Yes.
in order to have it higher so that we've got better, interest rates when we did our bond. So we had a better ending fund balance. So the intent was never to keep it at the 13% or whatever it was we had. I mean, that was.
We just
that was
recently
fine.
switched it to 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because.
Last year.
When we went after the bond, though, we had it up to almost 13%
Yeah.
because of bond rates. And we just got another A+ rating.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, and
So-
it saved us a ton of money being able to do that. Yeah, anything less than 5 gets real nervous.
Yes, it does.
That gets real nervous for me. We also have within the second year, the 26-27, Is that when we're classified bargaining?
I was just about to say that we are
Okay,
classified
I
bargaining
need to
next
still
year.
get under
25, 26.
25, 26, okay.
Yep. So we'll start that process, I think, in November.
I know that in the budget this year, there were some baked in numbers for an assumed percentage for the teacher thing. Is that baked into this, to these numbers with the
I
classified?
cannot remember.
Well, for this year's budget, some of the adjustments around the actual, so the settling the teacher's contract did show up here. In
Okay.
terms of planning ahead for classified, I do believe there was some planned roll up or increase that was factored in
Yes.
there as a guess.
And
for administrative,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
didn't forget. They forgot me.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking as far as the policy itself, because there's a lot of footnote things that are in there.
Yeah.
Because the goal has been kind of in that 8%, just to give a
Yes.
little bit, because the way Oregon funds education, it's seems like it's often a boom and bust kind of thing because of how they do it, and it's inconsistent year to year budgeting. So being able to have a little bit more, 3% is not it.
Nope.
5 is the base for me.
Agreed.
Little more is a little more comfortable, but I also personally would not want to say to someone, we're gonna keep that ending fund balance at 8 and lay off or reduce programs or people or just to maintain a number.
Yeah.
That also doesn't feel right. So it's kind of that making sure that we're not digging ourselves in, not having to borrow money to stay afloat. And not having to hold on to the funds that we've cut so deep that we lose the whole point of having quality education, options for kids, quality staff. We don't want to be in that position either. And there are districts that I'm aware of who have done that before. Spent it all, laid off, spent it all, laid off.
That's why
That's
many
not
are in this
comfortable
shape.
for us.
We have put aside, I verified that, an amount for classified bargaining.
Okay,
Okay.
you
It's
just
in
got
that
to
budget.
update on that.
For me,
Okay.
it's the messaging about consistency and and reliability, like it. Though it's not fun as a staff member to hear that there is an ending fund balance and there's still cuts,
Yes.
it's very reassuring to know that you have a stable job. And so
Yes.
the more stability that we can provide and communicating to the community as well as staff. How many days? I mean, that's really important to me, how many days that actually is. Because that makes that number seem much smaller.
Yeah.
When people realize that, and most people, I'm sure, do not. So I'm in favor of a range. Because like I said, it doesn't feel good to say, we're just gonna keep this money for a rainy day and fire staff.
Yeah.
It is pouring right now.
Yeah, but with the understanding that we will build back up.
We will.
That will be a priority for us so that we can stay stable and so that people can be reassured that their jobs are steady.
Well, and from my perspective, that's why it's what savings is for those rainy days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I don't know if I'd want to change the policy.
Right.
Because, if we change it to, well, a range of 5 to 8%.
Then it'll be, the floor will be 5.
It's.
The floor
yeah,
will be
it's easier to
5,
be at the floor.
and so I mean, if there's a way we could do this without changing our policy, I don't know, I mean, that's a Chris question.
That's a good question too, because is there, I believe the board has a possibility to amend their own policy temporarily.
We do have, it's a footnote number 2.
Okay,
Higher levels of unassigned fund balance may be needed if significant revenue sources are subject to unpredictable fluctuations or operating expenditure are highly volatile.
Okay, so we can,
In
So that in Oregon. Yes.
And I think,
So,
and
and then
some,
also number 4 kind of plays into as well. We've given ourselves some room to be flexible and still be financially prudent, because that is one of the board tenets,
and we
right?
have kind of the perfect storm, right? I agree with you. I think 8% is what we should be striving for. And we now have a policy that's new for us, that is a almost $5 million difference.
Yeah.
Than what we're used to, coupled with a revenue shortage
Yeah.
that was kind of unpredicted. And still some opportunity where we might get more money
Right.
to
fill it back
offset some of that, but we don't know all those moving
Yeah,
pieces.
and I do hate to change the policy prior to us knowing,
That's also a fair point.
because I think we could leave it and do that. However, I don't want to leave you guys in a position where you feel like, because I know you do have to make the cuts. Yeah, prior to us finding out what that total
We will be
is.
sending messages out very soon.
So, you know, in your scenario where it stays at 8, whatever slide that was, that one, I don't want that to communicate to you that you need to reduce an additional 3.1 million.
Right. Right.
Even if we keep it at 8. In anticipation that the numbers couldn't come in differently, and then at that time we could make.
But then there's not enough time.
I know.
You have to make the.
We can't change the budget.
But it could be that
Yeah.
we are allowing the fund balance to drop below the policy.
And maybe that's an action item on a business meeting coming up or wherever. I don't know what the mechanism is for that.
So it would be a
Well, I
it would
think
be a
it's about
combo, we're gonna keep it at 8.
Mhm.
Knowing that if necessary, we would adjust it to prevent you from
Mhm.
reducing the additional.
It also might be part of being really clear in our budget presentation, like, here's the budget, it's based on this. If we get more money, it's documented that it's going towards ending fund balance and special revenue fund, right?
Right.
That it's just really clear and documented in that way, and that the board supports
Yeah.
that conversation. But that's why we
Right.
needed to have this conversation about ending fund balance specifically tonight.
Yeah.
Because this is new for all of us, we're in the middle of drafting a budget.
And I'm comfortable with the direction that you all give, and I know you understand the picture, and I'm not reading anything other than this is the information we have. I also think that, I mean, we'd have been remiss had we not brought you all into the loop of what we were seeing. You needed to know.
Do you know the next? I'm assuming your answer is no. Yeah, is there a date for a next budget update? No.
The
Never.
May revenue forecast will come out, I think it's May 8th when it comes out.
No.
And then the legislature will likely have a solidified budget to move to the governor at the end of May or beginning of June.
But I think we could find out about special ed cap sooner than
Yes,
that,
we could.
right? There's some of that as that legislative stuff happens,
Essentially.
but then we also could find out that we need to pass through 95% charge.
Right.
Yep.
So, okay,
Get
so
it?
that leads to my next question.
But that's-
With everything that just was said,
Right.
does that, would you recommend then that would it be helpful to you if we push budget things back? Push the timeline back for the budget? Would it be helpful at all? I don't think there's any negative to us pushing it back.
But there are certain dates that we have to.
Yes, we
Yeah.
talked about possibly that 1 week, so is that
No,
helpful?
no, no, I mean, there's dates when we have to have a budget. And
Yes,
so you
yes,
have
yes,
to
yes.
meet certain
Yeah,
times
and
in order
June,
to do that.
and we do, and I think what we were looking at in the budget calendar was just a move back of a week or two in April. Different meeting. We'll talk again, all of us, and we'll get back to you with what we think may help.
Okay, and we're not voting on this tonight, so,
Right.
but, I mean.
Right.
Just
it's just
information.
It's something to consider.
But because I mean, we've started drafting a budget, we have to
We have
have
to.
it available for April 8th. So
Mhm.
there, if you were to say 8% is a hard minimum, then we absolutely would have to change that.
Sure.
We have started we have
Yes.
started the work on the range scenario, knowing that if we needed to pivot, then we would just change the time.
And I think the range is where we want to be. And again, it still keeps us in position of not doing the jerking people around.
Agreed.
with-
I'm wondering
with doing
what
it.
David's thinking too.
And it is consistent with how we've done things, and not because we've done it because that's the way we've always done it, but because it's been the prudent thing to do. That it's unsettling for the community, for the students, for staff to spend it all, bring it back, spend it all, bring it back.
Get rid of the reliability.
And-
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we've said
and
this
that's,
to
we've
all of you.
always been a little bit more conservative And it's kept us able to weather when stuff happens. We're not quite as frantic about it.
And we've said this to all of you too, and Tracy alluded to this. Special education cap could go up, but we don't know what that means for our district, because of the numbers of kids vary between districts, it's not just a standard amount. There
Oh,
could be,
I'm just checking on that special, it
Okay.
has a public hearing this week.
yep, we could receive a reconciliation check again, which was unusual, past couple of years we have. And that could be a bonus that we could use toward this. We have the federal uncertainty. All of this is still a crystal ball moving forward. And because we have to have a budget by June 30th, we have to start planning or we're just gonna be too late.
Well,
So is
and
Dennis gonna offer anything to us, or is Dennis? the-
No, he texted me,
Okay, he's texting.
yeah, he was texting
but
me.
I will say, our finance team will also, they reminded us today when we met with them. We have always been pretty conservative in our budgeting, so as they're selecting expenses, they always estimate on the high side.
Yeah.
And as they estimate revenues, they tend to go on the low side.
Right.
So year after year, we tend to have some cushion.
Yeah.
In our budget, and we wouldn't expect that to be different unless there's something else that we don't know about. So,
Back to your comment, which we took out on the slide. This could be the worst case scenario. I just don't want to say it absolutely could be.
I do wonder, I mean, I said, I'm in favor of the range, I'm not against that, but I do like the option of keeping it at 8. Knowing that we're willing to adjust it if necessary later, because I do think there's a likelihood that it would end up at 5 more often than not if we give a range.
for a reason.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Because I
And
think
don't-
ideally we
and I
want it
still
at
believe
5.
that That's a
Yeah.
wise thing
Yeah.
to do.
It is.
So I think I would rather say keep it at 8. And you know.
Yeah.
That
And
there's
then
an
we
option.
wouldn't routinely budget below that,
Right.
because it's not a routine budget year.
Different.
Yeah.
Norms.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it
That's why
helps
we
them
have
to do,
Do we have to keep it at a certain number, or can you keep it at a range? Can you say it has to fall between 5 and 8, and any overages have to go back to any fund balance?
That's up to the board. And from what I'm hearing, the members here tonight are more comfortable keeping it 8 and making exceptions if necessary.
Well, and I think Portland's language is written so that it says like a range of 5 to 10, but an expectation of 10.
Yeah.
So it could be.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. The other thing is the 8.6 million at 11 days. Does that mean that it's just that if funding stops 100%? Because I can't see spending $8.6 million in 11 days while they're still funding.
No, and so I did the math real quick, at 640,000 a day, which is I think what our operating cost is, it's about 13 days, a little bit over 13 days, so I want to be clear. And really, that would be that 2008 recession time of we would be using that reserve to extend the school year as much as we could till we ran out.
Yep.
So it's an absolute,
And we cut almost that many days.
we cut
we cut a lot of days, we cut
8 and 5 or
programs,
15 at one
we
point,
cut
yeah.
programs, we cut.
It was
cut
bad.
Teachers, it
Okay.
was
Yep.
bad.
And
It
even
was
then, we
bad.
got down to 1 day in reserves after cutting everything else.
Yeah.
But David, I mean, I see what you're saying of having a range in there. But I think strategically, one, it holds us accountable if it's actually held at 8. Knowing that we have our picky bank, we have these exceptions, whatever. But then also, if we have this range of 5 to 8. When it becomes bargaining time for any of
It's
the
a bargaining
groups,
challenge.
they're gonna be like, well, it could be at 5.
Yeah.
Well, no, we wanted 8, but your policy says 5 to 8,
Right.
so we'll be fine at 5, so I think.
Gives leverage.
Here's the other layer that might be a little risky going down this road, but
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it because it's something that's bothering me a little bit. As we look at our set asides for special revenue around tech and turf and technology.
Yeah.
We have been minimizing some of those set asides and kind of like putting some money aside, but probably not enough money.
Yeah.
And so we're still kind of kicking that can down the road, and at some point,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to face that reality. And so making sure that we are putting enough money aside for those big ticket, millions and millions of
Yeah.
dollar expenses, we have to be ready for that also.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
even if that's that we're at 5, 6, 7%, but we're also stocking up those funds for those big looming expenses. All of those pieces fit together in terms of what we have available to us. So I don't want the special revenue set aside to get lost in the conversation, because that has to be a part of the priority, because that's gonna get us really significantly if we don't monitor that carefully.
So for tonight, we've given you what we know in the moment. And we will stay on top of it and update you as necessary. It will guide how we present for everybody at the budget meetings, budget committee meetings, and hopefully we get positive news moving forward in the spring, which will help. Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm looking, we've got a couple more things going on. We've got the board meeting software conversation, and we have the resolution. Is that it, the two things?
Yes, two
Yep.
things. Getting there.
And it doesn't say on here, it has a discussion, but if we actually want to do a resolution against it, then we have to do an action item on that, Sarah.
Yes.
Yes.
But we have to, I
okay.
mean, it was brought to the board to discuss because
Right.
somebody had wanted to talk about it.
I'm not quite sure, I'll just say straight up, I'm okay either way if we do one or don't, I'm just not quite sure what we would do with it if we pass one, who it goes to and what's the exposure that it gets.
I think, I would commit to going down to Salem and testifying on Gresham-Barlow's behalf. What it does do is it helps me have the backing of the board and the guidepost, and it's something we, right now, there's not a hearing scheduled, but they still have a month to schedule hearings.
Okay.
And so, it does provide us an arrow in our quiver that if it does, then we could publish it to the papers. I could attach it to my written testimony, and I could also in my testimony say on X, resolution, blah, 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 on whatever date Gresham-Barlow, is in opposition of this bill. So just provides a little bit more beef to my argument, other than just being
Than just being a citizen.
yeah.
David, what do you think? Is Sean just fantastic or what?
We're talking about the Senate Bill 936.
Six.
I'm not as familiar with it as Sean is. Sean, what's the overview of it?
It's the bill that is, basically, it was, presented by, the city of Portland's, lobbyists to do a go around so they can continue working at the water treatment plant without getting the,
Without passing land use.
without
process.
passing the land
And
use
it
process.
would be for this water filtration plant, but it would also be, it
Future.
would set a precedent for any
Future.
federal, yeah.
Yeah, in any other processes, and I think it's in a really wonky committee to.
The
It's in the
Veterans
Veterans
Affairs,
Affairs Committee.
yeah.
But
Which doesn't,
it's not gonna stop the plant from being built, right? I mean, it just
No.
seems to me like this thing's gonna be built no matter what, right?
Means that they would have to, in order to build it, they would have to still pass the land use process that's already in place.
they're trying to go beyond and not have to pass that.
Right.
And so this bill would allow them to just say, hey, we're doing everything we want to do and not have the accountability of that land use hanging
I'll be
out there.
honest with you, as much as they've destroyed our roads with their trucks and gotten our students late and buses rerouted and all this stuff, I'm for anything that's gonna be in their way.
So previously, we did pass in the board piece, we did do the resolution in opposition to the plant. And we did that on March 1st, 2023. So we did already show, so we could go ahead and do the same thing against the
Yeah.
legislation that Senator Gorsuch has put forward.
Yeah.
And say, this
honestly, I
is
could-
not a great thing.
I could bring both resolutions and be like, hey, this is our history of opposition to.
All right.
Even just the
so-
precedent instead,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
What I would need to be able to do that is for a motion, and I would perhaps recommend that the motion includes that we would create a resolution in opposition to Senate Bill 936 and have it available to present to legislation. And then the mechanics of Sean taking it doesn't have to be in the resolution.
Yeah.
So,
I'll try
go for that. Okay, go for it.
See how we go. I would move to approve a resolution in opposition of Senate Bill 936. Which would include Sean. Okay.
Just say that.
That's
Just say
it.
straight.
That's
Yeah.
what I would.
Okay, so there's a motion for the board to
My
move
motion.
resolution in opposition of Senate Bill 936, moved by Holly. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
David got the second. Is there further discussion? So it's an expectation perhaps that Sean might write that, but that's not part of this, but that's something that I think we're gonna put on your lap.
Okay,
So
I'll probably just use the other
other
resolution as the
resolutions,
base.
okay? Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So David, any opposed? Nope, that's it. So it passes. So we will have a resolution against, in opposition to Senate Bill 936 as presented by Senator Borchak. Sean? Take it away.
Yeah, so I guess, do I bring it to the next board meeting or what's the
No,
process?
no,
I just write it and,
yep.
all right, it's there.
We're in opposition to it, and so I think the good idea is to use the one that we did before as your template,
Yep.
and we've said we're gonna be in opposition to it, so, yeah, okay. What's that?
That paperless.
Yes, Sarah, so the paperless board meeting software. Let me read the explanation, or who's doing this?
You don't need to, well, John and me.
So, I'm working with.
So the basis is, so Board Docs, which is our current system that we use. It was bought by a company called Diligent several years back. They are no longer going to keep supporting Board Docs with updates, software updates, etc. So we are being forced to migrate over to the new Diligent system. We have to make a decision as to whether we're going to migrate before our renewal date of April 30th. So that's kind of what has forced this onto the agenda. With that renewal, there is going to come a cost increase to what we are currently paying. So with our budgeting conversations that we just had, reached out to the other MESD board secretaries to see what they use, kind of pros and cons of the other system called Board Book that is highly used in a lot of districts around Oregon. So I sat in on webinar demos of both the new Diligent system that we would be using if we continued with Board Docs migrating to that system, and then also with Board Book. What I took away from that was that Board Book does mostly the same things. It's not as fancy looking, like it doesn't have kind of some of the bells and whistles in terms of how it looks on the websites. But it still has things like, you know, you can do your minutes template in there. You can set up all the executive summaries. One of the things that's nicer about it is you can print out the entire board agenda packet, including all of the attachments, which you cannot do with Board Docs. You have to print those out separately. So I kind of like that as a positive. And the biggest selling point for me was the cost. So Board Docs, we currently pay $12,000 annually for. It would be moving up to $13,500 when we change. Board Book is $3,500 annually. So that was kind of the big, I was like, well, it kind of does the same things. But the baseline is either way, we're gonna have to migrate to a new system, depending on which one you choose. So that'll require a little bit of training on the board's end to navigate a new online meeting management system. So just kind of wanted to bring that forward. And I didn't know if you guys had questions
So,
after that really quick spiel.
Yeah, no. So on the change up going from Board Doc to Diligent to whatever the new thing is
Mhm.
called Diligent. Are there other school districts that you're aware of that are gonna be making this migration? What kind of support? Cause you.
So I did find out that Board Pack, which was another system that we had looked at back in 2018 when we were looking at, it was also bought by Diligent. So I believe it's Riverdale, currently uses Board Pack, and they're moving over to, they're keeping with Diligent, so they'll be transitioning to Diligent. All the other board secretaries either use, I think one of them uses a Google Drive format, and then the other ones use Board Book.
And Oregon School Board Association also uses Board Book and has used it for a number of years with the association. stuff, so, so it would require a little bit of training for the board. But I would rely on your
Yeah.
ability to work with it.
Right.
Because you can train us, we're trainable.
Right.
And that,
But it's you that has to work with it on a regular basis, and so if it's something that you can get support for, you can work with it, and it'll give
Yeah.
us the same functionality-ish.
And I will say, I mean, their support has been, I think, pretty much across the, for either system. I've been able to reach out, when I had the demo with Board Book. I had a couple questions. He responded very quickly. Same with Board Docs with the associate that was assigned to our company. I had a couple questions about the changes and if it was required or not, if we could stay with Board Docs. And they're both very responsive in terms of answering those questions. So I think the support is there with either one.
So when you're looking at a multi-million-dollar budget, $10,000 is not a ton of money, but your time, your effort, everything is, and so. I wouldn't want to put that cost into the factor for me, like. In your ideal world, like, cause you work in it day in and day out. What would you like? I mean, like, what's your?
I mean, they look very similar. I think one of the biggest differences I noticed is like Board Docs, when I'm creating an executive summary, everything's kind of in, it's like it opens a Word document essentially, and I'm kind of working in one area. Board Book, it looks like there's different sections that you have to click, so it's got everything in there, but it's almost like a fillable format, so you would have to click into the box for the subject line, click into the box for the explanation. It's still all on the same page, but there's more areas where you have to like go in and, okay, I've entered that and I need to make sure I save that section, and then I go to the next section and I have to save that.
It sounds like it might take more time using the other.
Possibly, I would just with extra clicks, it would take extra clicks for it. Yeah, so, but that was kind of, we have to have a decision before April 30th is the big.
So I appreciate you bringing it to us, because we're impacted as well by the ability for us to use it. Again, I will lean back on the operational side, and if this is something that you think you can get the support for it, you can make it work, and you can train us who need just a skosh of training, then I would be in agreement that, you guys do what you need to do. I don't believe this is a board action. This is like for the information. And I think, we'll just be prepared that we're gonna have to learn something.
Yeah,
And
no matter what, you're gonna have to learn something new.
how soon do you have to, and like I said, I've used some of it with OSBA. We probably are not using all of the features that are available in it.
And I think that's accurate for, I mean, we're not using all the features on Board Docs either. I think that's accurate for any online system. You kind of pick and choose what works for your board and.
So, and both of them have a good virtual option because we do a lot of our OSBA meetings are virtual, so everything is through that way. How soon does this have to happen?
So we have to if we're not staying with, well, either way, we have to let Board Docs know if we're either planning to migrate or if we're switching off of them before April 30th. So it would have to happen sometime in April.
Okay.
So here's our plan then. Sarah and I will make a decision if that's okay with the board. We'll talk through, we'll let you know what the decision is, and then we'll plan for some training for you when we go.
Yeah.
You and I can meet this week or early next.
Yeah. So it's that heads up. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And that knowledge, it's gonna look different no matter what, whichever we go. I don't know.
It gives me more pizza.
Sean, Holly or David about this. It's, you know, it benefits us, but it's in a good way because Sarah's got us.
Yeah, I totally would defer to Sarah on what she wants.
All right.
Sarah likes it, it's less.
Sarah likes it, it's more.
Could we not go?
Yeah, if
No.
Sarah liked it, it was more. I think that'd be a little bit okay, but probably not. All right, so the last thing that we had was just a couple of, Holly and I met with Tracy about here we go, board future agenda topics, and we have been adding, where's my notes? I didn't bring my piece, oh, here it is, no, this. No, I didn't bring the right piece of paper. Okay, so we went over it. Tracy's gonna do it.
Tracy's gonna
do it. We have cleared a lot of the things off of the spreadsheet. We've been moving them, assigning dates to them where they go. We haven't received too many new ones lately. A lot of it is already been incorporated. is going to be part of the next couple of board meetings. And making sure that we're following the board goals of which category it fits in. So we've been trying to make sure.
I did do that.
Okay.
And the one. Like I said, we could take off, was is the one data, okay? The other one, he still wants an update on, but I think we need to clarify a little bit of the ask for that one, because I feel like there was a mention of his site account, and that wasn't really the information he was looking for. So actually, maybe I'll just ask him to update or even expand on what he's looking for in that presentation. And it wasn't something that needed to be right away.
Okay.
So actually, I think when we talked, he preferred it to even be after the budget. After this budget cycle.
Okay, so I'll maybe add a note
So
that
maybe
just says,
June, you know.
follow up in June.
Yeah.
Get more details.
Yeah. And slightly changed. You know,
Yeah,
so
sure.
Yeah, so keep that one, but.
Okay, done.
Yeah, and so it actually is looking pretty straightforward, and we'll just make sure that we'll get those cleaned up, and then everyone has access to that spreadsheet, right? So they can go look at it and see what the status is of their request. Okay. So I think with that, I don't think, I've got all my notes here, I don't think there's anything else, so we are closing items. Okay. Coming up next, March 19th is Budget 101, 7 p.m. in the partnership room of the Center for Advanced Learning. And Budget 101 is strictly an overview of how the budget cycle works, what's in the budget conversation. It is not actually going through, it's more for the board, the budget committee members to get together and get an overview of what's going on. I saw earlier that Dennis was online, but he's not anymore. So
Is it?
I don't think yes.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
that is the first on-field practice that Spencer was able to participate in since he broke his hip, and I was hoping to be there. Is it okay if I miss that?
I think so. That one, yeah, as long as there's gonna be a test, there's gonna be 5-page.
Send you an exam.
Five citations and.
As long as it's open book.
And it's
Yeah.
gonna be great. Yeah, so no worries, Sean. So yeah, just let us know. It is important for the budget committee to see who we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's at 7 p.m., Budget 101. And then we have spring break for those of you who participate. Some of us do not. I'll be working every day during that time. March 24th through 28th, 2025, spring break. We do not have any board meetings during that time. And then we come back for our regular board meeting in the council chambers of the Public Safety and Schools building at 7 p.m. on April 2nd, 2025. And as we saw from tonight, there's a number of items that will be moving forward onto that meeting. And I don't believe I have anything else.
Chris, did you say there was something on Monday, March 17th?
The night.
No.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
And the 18th is the safety summit.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
have we actually been invited to that?
I mean, I've
March
received,
18th is the
I have as
safety
a parent.
summit.
I have as a
I
parent.
don't know if
but
I was a board member.
I
but
just
have
looked it up online. So I haven't actually been invited as a board member because I don't,
Possible.
yeah,
I
so,
don't ever remember how I get invited. I just see it. How it's happening.
so that's March 18th.
Yeah.
At what time? 6 to 8? And is that at Gordon Russell again? Okay.
I'm not able to attend that this time.
Okay, so it's a registration item, so if you are going, you do need to sign up, correct?
Board members.
Board members don't need to.
We can come.
Yeah.
Okay, but any of the community, it's on. the
Community,
website.
yes.
It's a big splash.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay.
And last time we checked, we had about 50 or 52 responses.
Okay.
Is that about what we had last time?
Last time we had more,
We had a lot
closer to
more.
140, 160.
Yeah, we had a lot more last time. Okay, so that is available. And if you're not attending, if you want to just let Sarah know, or John, just so that we know who's gonna be there. Yeah. April 2nd, we already got to that regular board business meeting, 7 p.m. Council Chambers, Public Safety and Schools building. And with that, at 9:11, we are adjourned.
Hi, David.
Thank you.
And
All right.
the budget 101